I thought about, what would water say if water could talk to us? What would water say? So I wrote this book by the perspective of water. What means when I now read stuff from that book, it's not me, it's the water talking to you, okay? I try to bring my voice a little bit down so that you can understand, okay, now it must be water. You believe you know us. You drink us. Wash yourselves. Swim. You are two-thirds us. Without us, no life, no tear. And yet, what do you really know? You know our formula, H2O. Simple, you think. Two hydrogen, one oxygen, but simplicity deceives. We expand when we freeze. We float as ice. We store heat like almost no other substance. And yet, we barely exist for you. 97% is saline. Two-thirds of the rest is locked in ice. Less than 1% drinkable. We are older than the Earth itself. We existed in the primordial nebula from which the solar system was born. We traveled on comets. We were in the rock before life was. The water you drink today was once part of a dinosaur, a pharaoh, a cloud above the Himalayas. We have been circulating for billions of years. Not a single drop is lost. Think about that. Every part, every single drop exists for all this time. For all this time. Yeah, here, cheers. Stemware. I don't know if you drink water from stemware. I like it. Cheers. When I start a water tasting, I always start with stemware. And most of the people think, what is he doing? Yes, he's a water sommelier. Oh my God, he's drinking water from a white wine glass. Why? It's easy. Think about it. If I would pour in water in a white wine glass for you, you would think, okay, he's fancy, blah, blah. But then something must be different. I have to pay attention. Maybe it's something special. And that is the point. You think of that. And that creates attention and it creates awareness. And then you will expect special things and you will taste special things. That's very easy. So a tasting with water in an ideal framework lasts around about 60 minutes. We take 4 to 6 waters, the half still, the half sparkling. We start super light with waters with nearly no mineral content, maybe an alpine water or a glacial water, and then we increase that over the mineral waters up to then sparkling, starting with effervescent. So Arthur, you just mentioned Italy. I think Italy really has the best effervescent waters, super tiny bubbles. And then we increase that to super bold, high bubbled waters. And we end up with the big boys. I don't know if you know big boys. In Germany, we say Heilwasser. But when we try to find out what is Heilwasser all about, Heilwasser just means we have a mineral content over 3,000, 4,000, 7,000, up to 20,000 milligrams per liter. I don't know if you ever tasted a water like this. And when I'm coming to this water, a lot of European guys say, oh no, I don't like that. I had that when I was a child with my grandma. She liked that. I hated it. I won't drink it. Yes, as children, we hated stuff like that because we wanted, Arthur, we wanted chocolate. So that's easy because we were children, but now we are grown up. So now we drink gin tonic and whiskey and we like spicy food. And we forgot about these waters. So I just found a door to open the access to Heilwasser. Why not thinking in another way, disrupt that? So I say, let's have a sip of grown-up lemonade. And that's easy. People think, yeah, why should every lemonade just be salty, sweet and fizzy? Why not? Why not salty? And that opens everything. First impression, oh, wow, wow, salty, oh. And then, woo, what is that? And after the tasting, people are falling in love with waters like that. I had a guest in London, and he disturbed my keynote permanently and my tasting permanently. And at the end, he came to me and he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were crazy, but this last water, Vytautas from Lithuania, what is that? I found my water. 70 years old, and he found his water." But that was Vytautas. Vytautas has a mineral content from around about 8,000, and it's pure salt. Pure salt. You won't get that salt out of your mouth for over an hour. It's inside, you cannot lose it. And he said, yes, I've got it. So grown-up lemonade, why not? And that's the point. So in a water tasting, I can display the bandwidth, the full spectrum of that, what water really is. Most of us don't know the full spectrum. We just know the mainstream waters. We know from the grocery stores. We know from our region where we live. But at the end, the bandwidth is so much bigger. And with fine liquids, I have access to these waters, and so I can help people to bring those waters to them. Yeah, but before we talk more about those minerals and about taste, we must go back much further back to the beginning of everything. So listen again to water. I try to speak a little bit deeper. Genesis, born from stardust. Within the Big Bang, hydrogen emerged first. Simple, everywhere. But alone, it could become nothing. It needed a partner, oxygen. And oxygen had to be forged first. It was hammered out in the hearts of dying stars over billions of years, through generations of suns that burned and exploded, seeding space with the building blocks of the future. First generation of stars were giants, unstable titans of pure hydrogen and helium, but they were primitive. They left behind no planets, no rocks, and above all, no water. They burned through their substance in a blink of an eye. Then they exploded. No destruction. A birth through tearing. In these early supernovae, the first heavy elements were born. Every sip you take is the physical testament to this history. The atoms in your body were forged in dying stars. The oxygen you breathe was once trapped in the heart of a sun. You are literally made of stardust. And not me, the water, and I am the binding agent that shapes this dust into life. So now you get a feeling how water tasting with me works. So it's not about only drinking water, it's about Big Bang. Hydrogen, billions of years, supernovae, stuff like that. So when we're starting with lightly waters, that's the closest we can get to what water was before it touched the ground. So when you're thinking about the water cycle, whenever on the ocean the dust is going to the clouds, all minerality is getting lost. So the water is pure again. And then within the water cycle, it touches the ground and it does its job. Give me the minerals. Give me the minerals. And that's why all these waters taste so differently. It does not stay pure. And that is the reason why. Oh, shit. Now, this was the slide for what I just said right now. technique. So where are we now? Yes, yes, I think that's right. Is that right? Okay, I think it will fit. The earth shapes the taste. When calcium hums within me, I remind you of chalk, of bright cliffs that store the sun. Calcium ions dock onto the same receptor that recognizes sugar. This is why I often taste slightly sweet, almost milky when I am rich in calcium. When sodium sharpens my trail, I carry a faint memory of the sea. Magnesium adds bitter shadows, like the roughness of a stone wall after a rainstorm. Bicarbonate is my diplomat. It buffers acids, neutralizes aggression, and makes me soft and broad. Still, when I rest, sparkling when carbon dioxide dances within me. Two distinct voices. Carbonation works like a fine rain running over leaves, refreshing the landscape of the mouth. This is how I become terroir. A drop from the Alps does not taste like a drop from the desert. I carry rock, soil, and time. I bring landscape to the tongue, rendering geology potable. A sip is geography, not read, but tasted. So, and that is the core of water tastings. It's about sensoric, remarkable moments. So when you never ever had a few different waters next to each other, you might think water tastes like water. But remember, all of you, you're just thirsty, and that's a reason for drinking water. And so you take this sip, and the thirst is gone, and all is good. All you think is nothing. You don't think about the water. Maybe you think, oh, that water was not really good, but you will never think, oh, that was good water, because you were just thirsty. Okay. So, but when you're doing a water tasting, you have all these different experiences, and you can find out what I never liked this kind of water, and that's bicarbonate. Oh my God! Now I understand the labels. There is bicarbonate. I will never buy bicarbonated water again. Why should I? Because what is the goal of a water tasting? To help you finding your water profiles, your water preferences, your needs, and at the end, and that's the goal, finding out how can you manage your drinking routine? Because we have to drink these 2.5 liters per day, and everybody here knows it's a challenge. Maybe not every day, but we have a lot of days where it is a challenge, even for me. When I don't start drinking in the morning directly with 2 glasses, I lose this time. And I look on my watch, and I see, oh my God, it's 3 p.m. How much have I drunk? Not enough. So it's very important to find water you really like, so that it's no longer a challenge, but something you can do without any issues. Yeah. And I'm talking about what are these waters about? I met a guy from Peridot from Hungary, just here we met, and you know what you told me about deuterium? Deuterium? That's crazy stuff, and nobody knows that. So when I'm doing a tasting, I would really like to have Peridot inside to tell people how does this inflect your kind of living when you are using a deuterium low water. That's really necessary to understand, and so many people don't understand. So a water tasting also helps people to be informed. We do not know enough about water. As I said, we are 2/3 water, but we don't know what we really need to know to stay healthy and get old with health. How many time is left? I'm very slow, I think. 10 minutes? 10 minutes, okay. Be fast. Yeah, that's what I talked about. Terroir and taste. Terroir means as in wine, you know, the rain comes down and the ground is forming how the stuff tastes. And that's the same to water. Okay, but I want to talk about the inner sea. Let's listen to the water again. The inner sea. 2/3 of you is me. A newborn, 75%. In an adult, 60. In the elderly, 50. Do the math. To grow old is to go dry. Life is moisture. Death is the slow withdrawal of my presence from your cells. Your blood is 90% water. The pH of your blood is 7.5. 7.4. Slightly alkaline, and this value corresponds exactly to the oceans of 500 million years ago when your ancestors still lived in the sea. Your blood remembers. It carries the chemistry of the primordial ocean within it. The salt concentration of 0.9% matches the sea of the past, those waters from which the first life crawled onto land. You have preserved the sea of your ancestors. You carry geological time in your veins. So, do you see the big picture of that? Sometimes we think we are not connected, but we are. That's cosmic resonance. Here on Earth, with all other living, and also with all this time that this universe exists. I don't want that you think that's esoteric. And I think it's not esoteric. Think about when we're drinking now a drop of this Berkeley Springs water, which I really enjoyed last night, 2 bottles, wonderful water. It's just for this moment where you drink Berkeley Springs water. After that, it is you. And after that, when you lose that, it's getting back into the water circle and it's going back to the cycle on Earth. Since 4.5 billion years, we are connected. We are not alone. Yes. So hurry up, Mr. Eckert. Okay, look at him. This is Lu Yu. The art of drinking. What Lu Yu began with brush and ink, water sommeliers continue today. They taste me like wine. They smell, swirl, and pause. They taste the difference between limestone and basalt, between volcanic rock and glacial ice. They speak of minerality, mouthfeel, and finish. For heaven's sake, no ice and no lemon, says Martin Rees in Los Angeles. I don't know if you know him. Yeah, and he's right with what he says here, because ice numbs your tongue, lemon drowns out my voice. You want to hear me? Then stop shouting over me. Luxury is not the price tag. Luxury is the attention paid. The tastings do not end with the most expensive water. They end the next morning with the water from your own tap, with the question, do you taste now what you did not see before? If so, the tasting worked. Not because you are now buying premium, but because you finally know what you like. So, Lu Yu was a scholar in the 8th century. He was a tea master. 1200 years ago, he explored and evaluated the quality of water to check out which water is the best fit to this tea. 1200 years ago. So now we are here. I think that's not snobbery. That's physics. You know, you can drink water with ice, and you can drink it with lemon. That's not the thing, but you cannot do it in a tasting. When you really want to find out what is this water all about, you can't do this. So that's the point of a water tasting, and you For sure, you can go with additional stuff. You can say, okay, why not adding high quality chocolate? Why not mixing mocktails? Why not pairing with food, with wine, with spirits? But that's additional. These are other playgrounds for standard water tasting. That's not needed. Nobody needs that. And at last, there is one thing we also have to talk about, and I think we will talk about that today, and that is the quality of water. Because when this guy did that in the past, he did that with really natural waters. There was not that kind of pollution we have today, not these issues that we have today. So that's an ideal moment. But today we have issues we have to face. So in my tastings, I also talk about what water do you drink at home? So what quality does your tap water really have? And is there a filtration needed? And if needed, do you have a family? What kind of technique should you use for filtration at home? So that's a holistic thing in my tastings, so that people, when they are going home, really have the feeling, okay, I learned a lot about water, and I know how to find my water, and I can filter my water at home, and I have a good feeling for my family and for my kids. So, and that's why we should look, I'm coming close to the end, at the great thirst. The truth about consumption. This is about virtual water. I don't know if you know the concept of virtual water. I tell you, or the water tells you. You believe you know your water consumption. A glass to drink, a shower in the morning, 120 liters per day. That is visible. But that is only the 10th of the truth. 90% of your water consumption is invisible, hidden in the products you buy. 8,000 liters float to dye and wash the jeans on your legs. In your smartphone rest over 12,000 liters. Every bite of a burger devours the rain of entire pastures. An avocado tree consumes more water than a human being. Whoa! Whoa! And that's about giving context. So if you value water, you no longer waste it. We have falling aquifers. We're taking more water than Mother Nature can give back. So I know there are examples where we lost complete aquifers in between 50 years, but these aquifers took 10,000 years to get filled up. So when you hear about cities which are sinking, was heißt sinking, cities, Mexico sinking, and I think 70% of all Chinese cities are sinking. That's not because they are so heavy. That's because they lost their groundwater. It's like these balloons, air balloons. I saw air balloons. They are filled with air. When they lose their air, they are shrinking, and that's with the aquifers. When we lose our groundwater, we destroy the aquifers. That's a hard issue. Yeah, but it's not about giving up. It's about seeing ahead. So how do we view water? And so the goal of my tasting is not only knowledge, it's about unforgettable events, sensorically remarkable moments. So it is a question, can you still drink unconsciously after having a tasting with me? I help, yeah, I help people finding their water and their view on water. So finally, water speaks one last time. Now you might be thirsty, not only for a drink, but for a new way of being. Go back into your world. We will see each other in the next rain, in the next snowfall, in the next heartbeat. A drop releases, another emerges. Silence, evaporation. You are I. Technique. Yeah, for sure. The thing is, it's unpublished yet, just finished, but my last book was just in German, and I had the big problem that a lot of people said, that's not okay. So, so I have it in the English translation, so in the final stage, and I do my very best to publish it this year in somewhere in America. Yes. No, no, the first one I will never provide, but this one I wrote about, this will be published hopefully this year. Yeah, please. Yeah. What do you mean with how to calculate that? Yeah. Yeah. I think we do have a lot of companies which are not interested in letting you know how much water you use. Therefore, I don't know. I know there are a lot of people out there with wonderful ideas, and it's up to these people to do stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I know just when you're talking about the data centers, my friend and colleague Milind Patel, he works for Google and for Apple and for Facebook in regards to for the data centers as water sommelier, and he's working with them together on these concepts to bring the data centers into the ocean, because then we will not use water because it's cold enough, and the same when we do it in outer space, what Elon Musk tries to do. So everybody is aware of what we are doing, and Google and Tesla, for example, are very good in reusing the water. So in Germany, they have to do it like that. And so they are major players in doing the best what they can, better than other companies. Yeah. I'm laughing because yesterday a couple booked a tasting in Heidelberg at my place from London. So they're traveling really to meet just for this tasting. Actually, there is nothing planned in the US, but you can book a tasting virtually. What means I send over a box with the water, with some instructions, and then we schedule a call and we do it together. And that's what I do worldwide. That works really good, but you are heartily invited to come over to Heidelberg. Any questions?
As the water would say, Dankeschön. Vielen Danke. He's wonderful. Yeah, we're very honored to have international speakers. This is a real opportunity for people to hear the global aspects of water. And, what did Benjamin Franklin say? We only know the worth of water when the well is dry. And that is certainly true. Luckily, our wells are not so dry around here right now after all the rain and snow that you guys have had. It's a real pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Joe Doss, who has served as the president and the CEO of the International Bottled Water Association since 1999. Over the years, Joe has been a steady and trusted voice for our industry, bringing deep expertise in association leadership, government affairs, public relations, and the ever-evolving worlds of food, drug, and regulatory policy. But beyond IBWA, Joe's influence reaches globally through his service on the board of directors of the International Council of Bottled Water Associations. He's also a member of the Food and Drug Law Institute and the American Bar Association, reflecting his thoughtful and principled approach to the legal and policy issues that shape our business. In recognition of his many contributions, he was honored with the 2019 Berkeley Springs International Water Tasting Lifetime Achievement Award. But titles and accolades only tell part of the story. To many of us, Joe is not only a respected industry statesman, but a dear friend, someone who, with integrity, generosity, and a genuine passion for doing things the right way, he is quite simply a global leader whose impact continues to ripple beyond bottled water. Please welcome Joe Doss.
I think I'm going to use this instead of standing there. I'm going to knock that over. Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Arthur. I greatly appreciate it. And it's wonderful to be back here at Berkeley Springs with all of you. Always enjoy being here, seeing old friends, meeting new friends. And thank you, Jill and Arthur and Travel Berkeley Springs for putting this on. But it's great to be among people who have a passion for water. And so I always feel great coming back here. Let's see if I can figure this out. So today I'm going to give an update on water and hydration issues. I'm going to try and stay out of people's way if I can. And so there are a few issues I'm going to talk about concerning hydration and then a couple of other issues that are in the news with regard to water and bottled water in particular, such as microplastics and PFAS. So first, let's talk a little bit about IBWA, just to give you a little idea of who we are. We are a trade association. We were founded in 1958. We represent all different types of bottled water. We represent the small pack. We represent the 5-gallon and everything in between. Our members make spring water, artesian water, purified water, just any type of water that is being sold. I think there's a misunderstanding about the bottled water industry. Most of our members are small companies. I think most people think of it as very large international companies, but IBWA's members, 60% of them are small, family-owned businesses, some second and third generation. And when I say small, I mean small. About 60% of our members have annual gross sales of under $2.6 million. So that's small by any measure. And most of our work revolves around government relations, communications, technical, and science activities. So I usually start with bottled water statistics. I think people always like to see what's the bottled water industry doing these days. So these are statistics that come from the Beverage Marketing Corporation in their 2025 figures. So bottled water is once again the #1 beverage product in the United States by volume. And this is the 10th consecutive year that bottled water has held that position. We overtook carbonated soft drinks about 10 years ago, and we've never looked back. And so you can see here the volume in 2025, 16.8 billion gallons, a 2.5% increase. Sales, 52.1 billion, that's retail sales, 3.1% increase. And per capita consumption, 47.7 gallons. That's a 2024 number. I haven't gotten the 2025 number. But bottled water sales and volume have increased every year since 1976, which is the first time they started keeping track of the records, except for 2 years. And that was in 08 and 09 and during the Great Recession. So I think at that point, people were pulling back from some of their purchases. But every year, bottled water continues to grow in sales and in volume. So some of the messages that IBWA likes to promote about water is, first of all, we believe that water, whether it's tapped, whether it's filtered, or whether it's bottled, is important. People should drink water of all types. We don't just focus on bottled water. Water consumption is crucial for optimal hydration and healthy function of the human body. And it's also a healthy alternative to other drinks that might have sugars and caffeines and other things that you don't necessarily want or you want to moderate a little bit. And of course, this helps prevent disease states, diabetes, obesity. So very important to have water as an important part of a healthy diet. And we've been actively looking at about 3 issues at the federal level that impact healthy hydration. And I'll talk a little bit about them. One is the dietary guidelines for Americans. The other is the federal nutrition guidance graphic. And the other is the FDA regulation that allows bottled water now to use the word healthy on the label. So let's first talk about the dietary guidelines for Americans. They basically provide guidelines on what to eat and drink to meet nutrient needs, promote health, and prevent disease. This is a joint effort by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Department of Health and Human Services. They are published every 5 years, and we have been involved in the dietary guideline process each time they've come about. They're used importantly for federal and state nutrition policy and programs. They support nutrition education efforts. They guide local, state, and national health promotion and disease prevention initiatives. And various organizations and industries also use the dietary guidelines. So during the past 5 years, which is the period of time they've actually been looking into the latest version of the dietary guidelines, IBWA has submitted comments. We've testified at public hearings all the time, urging them to make sure that water is continued to be in the dietary guidelines and the importance of water to a healthy diet is stressed. So we've had several consumer and health groups that have been part of our efforts along the way, and they've joined us as well as several members of Congress in reaching out to USDA and HHS, encouraging them to make sure that water maintains its prominent position in the dietary guidelines. Among the groups that have been assisting us here, some very recognizable names: the National Association of Pediatric Nurse Practitioners, Partnership for a Healthy America, the University of California, Center for Science and the Public Interest, and the National Drinking Water Alliance. Those are just some of the groups, and here are many of their logos, many of the groups that have been involved in this effort to get HHS and USDA recognize the importance of water in the dietary guidelines. And here's some more of the groups that have been involved in this effort. So on January 7, 2026, the latest version of the dietary guidelines were released, and consistent with the prior dietary guidelines, they did underscore the importance of water. So in the very first section of the new dietary guidelines, it says hydration is a key factor in overall health. Choose water, still or sparkling, and unsweetened beverages. So that's a great win for the industry, great win for water and the importance of water. It's interesting, the dietary guidelines, the last time they were published before this were 169 pages. The latest version is 17 pages, so they really shortened them a lot. So another thing they did, and you may have seen this in the news, was when they published the recent dietary guidelines, they also published a food pyramid. So they got rid of the old MyPlate, which had been around for several years, and now they've gone back to a pyramid. Now, unfortunately, the new pyramid, much like the MyPlate, did not include water. So the food pyramid, I'm sure you're all familiar with it, or even the MyPlate, it's there again to help consumers and others have a good idea of what they should be eating in their diet. And so this is the old MyPlate. And for years now, we've been trying to get them to add water right there. And unfortunately, we were not successful in that. And so here is the new pyramid, the inverted pyramid. And so unfortunately, as I said, water is not on the new pyramid. So, you know, we're still hopeful that at some point we can get water on the nutrition guidance. There are 80 or more other countries around the world that include water on their nutrition graphic, whether it's the Chinese pagoda or whether it's whatever it is, they already include water. And so we're woefully behind in terms of giving advice to our consumers about the importance of water. So IBWA and those groups that I just showed you their pictures, their logos and their names, we're going to continue now to meet with USDA and HHS and encourage them to translate that positive message about water into their educational materials and trying to figure out how we can make sure that they continue to promote what's in the dietary guidelines, particularly about water. And hopefully eventually we might get them to add water to their food pyramid. We think it's a little too early now to go back and start lobbying them because they just literally published it. So, but we will not stop trying to get water on there. The next issue is the FDA healthy labeling regulation. I think the last time I came and spoke to this group, it was still being considered at FDA. As you know, bottled water is the healthiest beverage on the shelf, the healthiest packaged beverage, bar none. But surprisingly, until just last year, bottled water could not use the word healthy on the label. And that was because of some FDA regulations, because the FDA regulations not just apply to bottled water, but they apply to all other foods. So there are significant regulations out there that determine what products can use the word healthy and what you have to have in it or what you don't have to have in it to use the word healthy on your label. So we were very happy to see that in September of 2022, after many years, a decade of asking FDA to allow bottled water to use the word healthy, that they issued a reg that applied to all foods, but one small part of that reg was to allow bottled water to use the word healthy on the label. So we were very excited about that. And again, we got some of our consumer and health groups, as well as members of Congress, to support our position and go forward to FDA and ask them to make sure that this regulation did include the right of bottled water products to use the word healthy on the label. A lot of those same groups did that. It helps consumers make smart choices. And obviously it's a more healthy lifestyle, so we like to encourage that. So FDA on April 28 finally did issue last year, issued a regulation that does allow bottled water use the word healthy. So after a decade of that, we were very happy to see that. Bottled water automatically qualified to use the term healthy on its label. Some foods can't. Some foods have to show FDA that they are. They have to show what the contents are, but water is water, and they automatically qualify for that. We do not need to have that nutrition facts panel on the label because usually if you're making claims of healthy, you have to have a nutrition facts panel. But that's just a waste of label space because if you know bottled water, if they had a nutrition facts label, it would just say 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. It would just be all zeros. And importantly, companies can start to use the healthy on their label immediately. The actual compliance date is not until 2028, but they can start immediately to use the term healthy on the label. Now, when they issued this proposed regulation at FDA, there were some who said, well, you know, maybe we shouldn't allow bottled water to include the term healthy on the label because it might confuse consumers and they might think that maybe tap water wasn't healthy. And so they had a part in this regulation that asked for comments about that point. In particular, they said, we'd like to hear your thoughts on whether allowing bottled water to use the word healthy would somehow confuse consumers about the healthfulness of tap water. And so they did that. We obviously commented and said it would not confuse them. It would remind them that drinking water is healthy. And so we were very happy to see that FDA agreed with our position. Again, it's going to benefit everybody. And as we pointed out, we don't consider ourselves to be in competition with tap water. We support strong tap water systems. Our competition are basically the sodas and the fruit drinks and those other other beverages, if you will. And if you look at bottled water's growth during the past 20 years in volume, almost all of our growth has come from the beverage and fruit drinks area. If you put a pie graph together and you looked at it, our gains we're about 46% now of the liquid beverage industry, and the soft drinks has just gotten smaller and smaller. So almost all of our growth is coming from that segment. And we also have done polls to show that 71% of people drink both tap water and bottled water, and that's great. And we think it should be accessible. We support strong municipal water systems, and we encourage you to stay hydrated no matter how you're doing it. So at the end, as I said, FDA said there was no evidence to suggest that consumers would be confused by having the word healthy on the bottled water label. So two other issues would like to chat with you about that are in the news a lot and usually talk about bottled water. One is microplastics. So I'm sure if you've read the newspapers and seen videos, news, et cetera, there's a lot of talk about microplastics. They're everywhere. They're in the soil, they're in the air, they're in the rivers, they're in the oceans, even in the polar ice. And the most significant source of microplastics are clothing, tires, and just urban dust. Those are the major sources of microplastics. Now, because they're ever present, they may be detected in foods, beverages, and tap water. It could be that you would find them in there, that is for sure. And when conducting research into microplastics, many times they use water when they're testing for them because it's the easiest thing to test. There's nothing else in it. There's nothing in it that might be confused for a microplastic. So many times they use bottled water and tap water to test because it's an easy medium to test. And so, but research shows that food and beverage packaging are not a primary source of microplastic pollution. So there is, however, a lot of misinformation that continues to spread about microplastics, both social media, traditional media, but global authorities agree that human health impacts of microplastics and nanoplastics remain uncertain. The US Food and Drug Administration, when specifically asked about microplastics in bottled water, said that they are not aware of scientific evidence that would support consumers being concerned about potential levels of microplastics or nanoplastics in food, including bottled water. You also have the European Food Safety Authority, which is the agency for Europe, very similar to FDA. And they have basically said, again, there is not a sufficient basis at this stage to estimate exposure from food during their uses. And so research into the impacts of microplastics is ongoing and hopefully will help answer some of these questions, and we support more research being done on this issue. But at this point, there's no standardized testing method, and there is, to identify what there are, there's no universally accepted definition of what a microplastic or a nanoplastic is, and no agreed upon threshold for any possible health risks that might be associated with microplastics. So we are continuing to try to advance the scientific understanding of microplastics and make sure that we're doing all that we can to protect the consumers that drink our products. So these are some of the things that we are trying to do, that we support doing in this area. So we think you need to develop standardized definitions. So if you have clear science-based definitions, that will help us all share information and be talking apples and apples. So that's one of the things we want to validate testing methods. You have to make sure your testing method that you're using here is the same as that they're using in Europe, et cetera, so you can compare the results. We want to expand health research into this area. And we want to have any action that's taken to be guided by science. It has to be peer reviewed. There are so many times lately that we see a study that comes out And the study, if you read it carefully, has so many things in it that says, well, but there's this reservation, and we can't make sure. But yet the media seems to take that and they put it out there, and it scares a lot of people. But the study itself, if you read it, said there are limitations, and they're not making unequivocal statements. They are postulating what might be happening, and it might be. But at that point, it's not yet been proven by peer review. So next issue is PFAS. Obviously, I think you may have all heard about PFAS. It's an issue everywhere. It's an issue in West Virginia. It does get a lot of attention. It is a group of man-made chemicals. The ones you hear most about are PFOA and PFOS. Those seem to be the ones that are most present. They have been manufactured since 1940, and they're in the environment everywhere, and they don't go away easily. So they're called the forever chemicals. So if you hear about forever chemicals, that's what they're talking about, is PFAS. And they do have adverse health effects, and that is a certainty. So they're in some food packaging, and that could be that because of the machinery that they were processed with, use PFAS. The food was grown in PFAS-contaminated soil or water. There are some products, commercial products, stain and water repellent, non-stick products. That's something that they were using this for. And there are also the anti-flame retardant foam that they put down at airports. That's quite frankly how a lot of the groundwater got contaminated with PFAS, is that many of the airports all around the United States and military bases, they have regular tests of when, okay, if it's an emergency and a plane lands, we have to go out and we have to spray it. And when that happens, they're actually spraying this substance at that test, every test all around the United States. And then that gets down, it drips into, drains into the groundwater. And that's how a lot of the PFAS got into the groundwater throughout the United States. It can also be in workplaces, and it sometimes can be found in tap water. And again, if it's found in tap water, it's usually because people have been spilling things into the environment, and it gets into the surface water, or it gets into, could be the groundwater. So in April of 2024, EPA did issue a final regulation that did establish maximum contaminant levels for 6 of the most common PFAS substances. And then in June of 2024, a couple of trade associations sued EPA in response to their issuing that reg. The lawsuit basically alleges that EPA did not follow the requirements of the Safe Drinking Water Act when they issued their regulation. And then in September of 2025, basically the new administration came in and decided that they wanted to vacate 4 of the 6 PFAS substances that had been in the final regulation that was issued by the prior administration. Just recently, January 20, 2026, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia unanimously denied EPA's attempt to vacate those 4 substances. Basically, EPA was trying to, quote, in the legal term, vacate them, meaning they were just going to withdraw them without public comment. It's a legal way that they could have done it, but the court said you can't do it that way. You have to, pardon me? The US EPA is regulating 6. There are thousands and thousands of different PFAS substances, but EPA is only regulating 6. They wanted to take 4 away from those 6. The court said you can't do that just by immediately vacating them. You have to go through the usual rulemaking procedures in order to have them removed from the regulation. So now basically you're going to have to, that lawsuit that was brought is going to continue on through the courts to determine whether or not EPA can remove those 4. They want to keep 2. They've made it clear PFOA and PFOS they want to keep. The other 4 they're looking to remove. So let's talk about bottled water and PFAS. IBWA and our members have been working on this issue for many years. At this point, FDA does not have any regulation for PFAS for any food, and IBWA is a food regulated by FDA. So there are no PFAS regulations for any foods at FDA. So in 2019, IBWA wrote a letter to FDA and encouraged them, asked them, pleaded with them to issue a regulation for bottled water, for PFAS in bottled water. We wanted that regulation. And at that time, FDA said it was not necessary. They had done testing of bottled water products and determined that it wasn't an issue. So they declined to issue a bottled water regulation for PFAS. And so even before they denied that, IBWA members our board took action in 2019 and approved a standard of quality for 18 PFAS substances and require our members to test their water annually for PFAS. And then when EPA issued its regulation in 2024 for those 6 substances, we then aligned our standards of quality for those 6 that they had, and we were already more stringent than some of them were anyway. But we also, importantly, we kept those other 12 substances that we already had. So we are currently looking at 18 PFAS substances, not 6. Importantly, FDA, I think, because they have stated that there is no need to have a bottled water regulation or any other food regulation for PFAS, they have done shelf surveys. And their most recent survey in April, they released the results of a shelf survey where they tested 197 domestic and imported bottled water samples that were collected at retail locations throughout the US between 2023 and 2024. And they included all different types of bottled water, purified, spring, artesian, all different types. And so the results were that none of the samples had PFAS levels that exceeded the EPA maximum contaminant levels for PFAS in tap water. So none of them exceeded the EPA levels. And in addition, all of them were below the IBWA SOQs that we set for bottled water. So we were encouraged by that. Most of them, by the way, were non-detects. I mean, they actually gave you a list of every single sample they took, and most of ours were non-detects. There were a few in there, and it was probably, I don't know how it got in there. Some of bottled water, obviously, not all of it is spring water. A lot of bottled water these days is used, they take municipal water, and then they filter it, and they purify it. And so it is possible that it could have been, and I think it was, if they looked at the samples, I think that those that did have it came from a municipal source. Obviously, it didn't get it all out. So you may not be aware of this, but by law, once EPA issues a regulation for tap water, once that regulation for tap water becomes final, FDA has 180 days from that date when the EPA reg becomes final to look at that substance to determine whether or not it needs to be regulated in bottled water. So within that 180 days from that EPA reg becoming final, or effective, I should say, FDA's got to decide, what are we going to do with this substance that's being regulated by tap water? What they can do is they can set their own standard. They can use the EPA standard, or they can make a determination that it's not necessary for bottled water for whatever reason. That is usually not what happens. What happens is they usually take the EPA standard and they make that the bottled water standard. And the reason being is if you're going to issue a standard, you have to have done the science. And EPA's already done the science. If FDA were going to have a different level, they would have to go and do that science, and it would take years and years and years. So they usually adopt the EPA standard. And importantly, if FDA were to do nothing by law, and we were the ones that got this law enacted, if FDA does nothing, takes no action, that EPA standard for tap water automatically by operation of law becomes applicable to bottled water in the United States. And we were the ones that wanted that. We wanted to make sure that we are being as stringent, and in some cases more stringent, than the tap water regulations in the United States. So that is a roundabout way of saying that when the PFAS regulation becomes effective, and by the way, it's not until April of 2029 that the EPA PFAS regulation comes into effect. But once it does, FDA is going to have 180 days to determine what they need to do about regulating PFAS in bottled water. Again, we've gone to them as recently as last year and said, please issue a reg. And part of it is we want to be able to have a regulation that our members can say, okay, we meet this regulation. The other reason, quite frankly, is that we want, if FDA regulates it, there is preemption. Right now, we are subject to many different state regulations. Our members sell bottled water products throughout the United States. This state might have this level, this other state has a different level. So we're trying to make sure that there's a uniform standard for regulation, regardless of what it's for, PFAS or any other substance. So we went and asked them, again, I was in the meeting last year and I said, please, will you issue a PFAS standard? And they said, probably not right now. They've just got a lot on their plate. The other thing is that these days, all agencies, you may know about this, I hope I'm not running late, all agencies within the government, if you issue one regulation, you have to repeal 10. So any agency in the United States these days issues one reg, you have to repeal 10 to meet the president's executive order. So that has made it so agencies throughout the government are very particular about when they issue regs. They know they've got to take 10 for every one they issue. So if you're going to issue a reg, you're probably going to be on your priority list, not on my priority list. So we go and tell them, please issue a reg. And they said, we've probably got some other regs that we would rather issue because we're going to have to look for 10 that we're going to have to repeal. Except there might be an exception for that, that if you can determine that your regulation that you're issuing is actually having deregulatory impact, they might be able to get away without having to repeal 10. So we continue to talk to them. And so we hope that they will issue a reg. And we hope it's soon. So basically, we continue to try to do all that we can, both in the microplastics, PFAS, and any other substance to make sure that we're doing all that we can to help protect our consumers and give them confidence to drink bottled water. One state, interestingly, Massachusetts, because of the PFAS issue there, has set up a separate section of their website on the Department of Health website where if your particular community in Massachusetts is affected by PFAS, they've got a list of bottled water products that you can buy. If you show the Department of Health that you tested your bottled water and it has met the standards for PFAS, I think that Massachusetts has one, then they'll put you up on their website and point consumers to the bottled water that they can drink in their community, which I thought was quite nice of them because they're usually not too friendly to bottled water. So anyway, we continue to try to do what we can to help protect consumers in all areas. I think that is my last slide. And so if you need any additional information, just give me a call, send me an email, and I'll be glad if there's time to answer any questions. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry.
I have a question. The inverted food pyramid you showed had a bottle of booze in the middle. What's that all about?
Go back there. I don't know if I can pick that up. Hold on.
It looked like a big jug of wine. I'm not surprised.
I think I know I think that was olive oil. I think it might have been. Let's go back. Let's check it. Oh, there we go. I think that's olive oil.
Okay.
If that's what.
See, I didn't know if we were going to European market. That's right.
No, I think
Second, what is the real barrier for you guys getting roadblocked on getting the water added to the pyramid? Why, and how long has this been going on?
All right, well, I will share conspiracy theories.
I'll back them up.
Well, for a long time, what industry is prominently in this old my plate? What industry is prominently there?
There
Dairy.
you go.
Dairy. There is some thinking, and it's possibly true. The dairy industry is under a lot of attack these days, particularly, well, not with the new one. I mean, with the new one, there they are. They're right there with whole milk. But prior to this administration, the dairy industry was under attack. And many people were questioning, quite frankly, whether they should even maintain their position here. There's some thought that the dairy industry basically quietly said, I don't know if you want water on there, because they were afraid they would perhaps lose their position. It might make it easier for somebody to get rid of them. And that's why we always made it very clear when we talked to HHS and USDA, we said, we want to add water, and we think you should keep dairy, because they are a powerful lobby. And we do say, keep dairy. We always said, keep dairy. We just wanted water to be added. So that's the answer to that question.
What's their verbiage? What
It's never been articulated publicly. That's why I say it's conspiracy theory,
Well,
but
it's not conspiracy. I grew up on a dairy farm, all right? We protected ourselves.
Yeah.
You very bad people.
Bob is probably right. He's always right.
And lastly, Joe, the position for microplastics for the IBWA, what is that? What is that? And then what is your personal?
Our position is that right now,
The harmful aspects.
pardon me?
The harmful aspects of microplastics.
Again, we are like everyone else trying to determine what is the threshold level for possible human health impact. Right now, EFSA, FDA, some of the best minds in the world, WHO looked at this issue and said, we need more research. So I will say that our position is we need more research. And once there is research and you can determine what that level is, whatever it may be, that is the threshold level. Above this point, you have health impact. Below it, you don't. We'll make sure we meet it. That's why I say in some respects, for PFAS and for everything else, it would be useful to have a level. So we could say, okay, there's the level, we got to meet it. So I hope that answers your question. We are basically seeking more science so that we can have a better idea of what the actual health impact is.
Right. There's not enough science on plastics. A lot of the plastics are, we've had plastics in our bodies since about WW2. And deaths has not been attributed to it. Brain damage has not been attributed. Muscle damage has not been attributed to it. Aging, perhaps. And this is a very, very, there are thousands and thousands of molecules in resins that result in plastic. We know that some of them are carcinogenic, but we don't know the thresholds in which those would impact human health, because almost everything we touch has some carcinogenic compound in it, some carcinogenic molecule that has not affected human health per se. And so it is really a mystery of science right now. And nobody's, to my knowledge, nobody has taken a negative position against microplastics and nanoplastics except the consumer.
And I think it's generated by the media. That, again, and again, the media is good. It's good to be there, but they're taking studies that really didn't say what they think they said, and they're putting them out and they're scaring people. And so you need better testing too, because quite frankly, they did find in a couple of these studies, EFSA found that basically some of the ingredients, some of the things they identified as microplastics weren't. Other particles. I'm sorry, I think I'm being asked to get on.
Just a real brief
Yes, ma'am.
question. Can you address for us the latest in either the EPA or your industry, cleaning up the bottled water from our rivers, canals, lakes, streams, oceans, seas, and particularly the plastic bottle, although there is glass bottle there too. What's the latest on that?
Well, I can tell you this, that we are very, very supportive of recycling. We want the bottles back. So we support deposit laws in the states because we want to get those bottles back so we can make them, recycle them and use them to make new bottles. So we're part of Keep America Beautiful. We are part of the recycling partnership. We're doing what we can, and our members are trying to get all their bottles back. And, so we obviously think consumers need to recycle their products. And if they did that, there wouldn't be all over the, wouldn't be in the oceans. They wouldn't be everywhere. They would be.
Waterways.
Yeah. So I know I'm out of time.
No, you're good. You're good. Thank you very good. No, I mean, you are.
Am
Thank you, Joe. So for those of you who aren't aware, at the end, we're going to have a panel discussion, and there will be an opportunity for more questions from each of our speakers. I don't even know if I told some of the new speakers that, but thank you so much, Joe. Just like everyone that usually speaks here, any one of these people up here could do the whole seminar. And that I know Joe could, and certainly Pat could have done that. And this next guy too, we had a discussion about all of the different topics that we could discuss. And I kind of looked at what everyone else was doing, and we chose, a very limited section, because Dr. Van Hitt is a 10th generation West Virginia and freshwater biologist with expertise in fisheries, water quality, climate change, and open science strategies. And he currently serves as the senior scientist with the West Virginia Rivers Coalition. So welcome, Van.
Oh, good to see you guys. First order of business. Let's all just take 3 seconds, stand up, shake that leg out, shake that other leg. Remember what it feels like? Oh, yes. Deep breaths, that's right. Well, it is really a privilege and a treat to be with you all today in this esteemed event and this esteemed panel. My name is Van Hitt. I'm the senior scientist of the West Virginia Rivers Coalition. And today what I'd like to do with my time here, as we celebrate water, I'd like to expand our thinking, enrich our thinking about this. When we see this, well, as Pat put down there, as we look at this, I want to help us enrich our understanding of that there are ecosystems in this glass of water. There is public health in this glass of water. There is economic development in this glass of water. This is what we think of as water security. So what I'd like to do with my time today is to tell some stories from West Virginia, across the state. I'm based in Shepherdstown. I grew up in Morgantown. I feel very blessed. I've done my graduate work in University of Montana and Virginia Tech, elsewhere. And I'm very blessed to bring this work back home to the Mountain State. The stories I'm going to tell are really, there are multiple stories. Think of it as a continuum. West Virginia is blessed with some of the most pristine headwaters on Earth. We're also challenged with some of the most extreme water poisoning on Earth, and we have to be honest about that. We have to understand that. So the stories I'm going to be talking about today are stories of risk and resiliency. And it starts here in the headwaters. One of the main missions of the West Virginia Rivers Coalition is to protect the source waters, to provide clean water for all. And our next speaker, actually after the break, is going to be talking about some very important work in the southern West Virginia coal fields. I look forward to learning more about that in particular. It's very good work. But it starts here in the headwaters. Source water protection, for many reasons, and we'll talk about some of the reasons for a municipal perspective, but also public health perspectives, and in a social and economic justice perspective. Source water protection is crucial. We also work closely with water quality standards, and we have a lot of fun, and the West Virginia legislature is in session right now, and that's a whole series of fun stories to tell there. And my role as a senior scientist with the organization really is in community empowerment through community science. And we have several examples, including locally, the Warm Springs Watershed Association doing fantastic work here. So we want to talk about that. Tools that local organizations are using to empower themselves, protect their communities, and to advance what we think of as water security, ecosystems, economic development, public health, that intersection. That's what we're talking about. These are the stories I'll be telling today. You know, my personal story, growing up in Morgantown, I did graduate school work, and then I was blessed to work with USGS, Leetown Science Center. It's now the Eastern Ecological Science Center. They like to make things more wordy. That's in Kearneysville, West Virginia, just a stone's throw away to the east. And there are several pieces of that work that have informed my worldview. They've deepened my worldview. For example, I've been lucky enough to sample some of the springs and streams in this area. The limestone under our feet has a story to tell, a deep, ancient history of limestone that is important right now for water security. And I'll explain how that works. So I've been very fortunate to work with all sorts of great people. And also in my new work with the West Virginia Rivers Coalition, it's about communities, about community science. So we'll talk about that too. So I have found it is sort of a whiplash experience. You know, on one hand, in West Virginia, we have huge challenges. Wyoming County, okay, Wyoming County, Mingo County, southern West Virginia counties, people are drinking poisonous water, full stop. We need to know that. We need to know that. As we celebrate the beauty and the pristine water that we have, we need to recognize that is the case. In some places, unfortunately, we have challenges. We have toxicology. This is an individual, a fish that I observed downstream from a mountaintop mining site. That's a sign of selenium poisoning. We could talk about the ecotoxicology of that. We could talk about fracking and the other sorts of industrial developments that we know have risks, and we have to be honest about that. But we also need to recognize the resiliency in this place and in this state, the resiliency of our native fish, brook trout. We have success stories to tell there, the mountains, and more importantly, the resiliency of these communities and the people that live here. So when we think about water, we're thinking about land, we're thinking about place, we're thinking about forests, and West Virginia is blessed in this. And we're also thinking about this connection. So when we think about brook trout, our native state fish in West Virginia, the cold water indicator, climate indicator species needs cold water, needs clean water, needs complicated physical habitat. If you see brook trout, you know you're in a stream that is intact. But as we think about that, we are also thinking about the land, that connection to the forest. In this animal is the story of the woods. Now, this is what we know. This is how we've been taught to think about the United States. We all know this. But the more work I do in this space, the more I start to see the world like this. This is the United States, right? And yes, Canada exists, okay? Okay, we don't, Gulf of whatever, I know, Canada exists. This is how we are connected. This is nature talking. Yeah, this is how we're taught to think of the world. This is how the world is. Rivers are the center, right? We treat them as the political edge, and that makes some sense. It's hard to get across. But they are actually they're the center. So if we change our thinking, we see rivers as the center, and that helps us organize ourselves. Same thing in West Virginia. This is what we're taught, 55 counties, watersheds. And we should recognize not only does Canada exist, Virginia exists. And I'll explain when we start talking about our limestone here. Water from this area is feeding our supplies here. So as we sit here in the Eastern Panhandle in Morgan County, we should recognize that we are connected through the movement of limestone, through karst systems, through fractures, through faults, and it means we are all drinking from the same cup. That's what it means. It means we're connected. So let's understand the risks. And I'll give you a broad survey of some of these issues. There are many, many. Each one of these could be a career's worth of work. So I just want to give you a broad overview. We can look at the big picture in terms of water systems in the state, and we do see some encouraging signs. This is too simplistic, and I'll explain why. But when you look at the reporting for public water systems, you can see some encouraging trends there at some level in terms of green, viable, red, blue, marginal, and red failing. In general, there are fewer failing systems, but this is not the true story. This is kind of a glossy view. So I'll explain. It's more complicated than this. But we have to zoom out first. You can't think about water without thinking about the Earth's cycles of water. And we have to understand, Helene, what happened when you put multiple feet of water onto Mount Mitchell in North Carolina? Doesn't matter what amount of forest cover you have, that mountain is going to fail. And it did. And we saw that, Helene, this is Marshall, North Carolina, tragic. People are still digging out from this. But not just in North Carolina, of course, Charleston has experienced devastating floods as well. And this is real. When we think about water resources, we have to start with this. We also know that from federal research with NOAA and others that we have documented in West Virginia disturbing trends. We have to be honest about this. Air temperatures empirically have increased. We know this. Precipitation, total volume of water has increased. But it's happening in less amount of time. So we see extreme weather events increasing. Extreme weather events are increasing, and we know this with high confidence. We also know with high confidence that some of the land use practices have downstream significant impacts. Mountaintop mining to produce thermal coal and metallurgical coal has increased flood risk in many places, and this is because when you take a mountain and flip it upside down and run water through it, you don't have the evaporation to move that water back up into the atmosphere, and so that base flow and peak flows can be increased. We're highly confident of this through research at USGS, US Geological Survey, where I used to work. Of course, impervious surface, that's another flood risk for reasons that we know. When we look across the state, we can see it's not evenly distributed in terms of flood risk. Relatively low risk in our carbonate karst landscape, relatively high risk in steep mountain valleys in the southern and southwest portion of the state. But here's the key point. We're underestimating risk across the board because these models are based on this idea of a 100-year flood. Well, as I said, 100-year floods are not 100-year floods anymore. We have to change our thinking about risk. And it's not just high sides or floods that we have to be concerned about. We have to be concerned about low water events too, droughts. In the last several years, we've seen this up close and personal. Examples from our backyard here. Bolivar Harper's Ferry, if you think about Harper's Ferry Waterworks, unfortunately, the primary source of water there, Elks Run, disappeared in 2024. And they were forced to use their backup supply, which is the Potomac River. That changed the kind of chemistry in the water. It changed the amount of chlorine they had to use, cost more, increased the price for ratepayers, also increased the chlorine disinfectant byproduct. So we can talk about that. But here's Blackwater Falls. Blackwater Falls does not usually look like this. Who here has been to Blackwater Falls? Have we got people that know this? Okay, for our visitors from Germany and across the world, go to Blackwater Falls. It is amazing. Tucker County, fantastic. So drought's real, and drought has huge consequences. Richwood, for example, was a few days away from running low or extinguishing their aquifer, their reservoir. We're also setting up monitoring stations in reservoirs for the town of Davis in Tucker County so that we have eyes on these precious resources. And I can talk about some of the methods we're using for that with citizen science. Of course, this is an impact for the agricultural community as well, right? Grappling with the worst drought in 25 years. This is real. And I have to say, unfortunately, even though we had rain yesterday and a little more in the forecast, we are still in drought. In this region, this is the U.S. Drought Monitor from just a couple of days ago. We do see, a severe drought, D2 level drought for this region. And this has implications for us. This is one of our local groundwater level monitors. USGS has these, it's fantastic gauge network. And this essentially is a well in northern Jefferson County, just to our east a little bit. And this is in that karst terrain I mentioned, near Rocky Marsh Run, one of the streams that flows into the Potomac River. The red line here, these are dots, these are samples of the level of the water table. How high up is the groundwater? And then, this is where it should be, or at least based on the period of record. I think there's like 40 years of record at this site. Impressive. And this is where it is now. And you see that little bump? That's snowcrete melting, right? We made it. We survived the snowcrete. Wow, what, 2 weeks, I was like, we're done with this. But it shows us that even significant snowfall events were not enough to get us out from this to something closer to this. This matters in particular because this is the surface level of the water table. Well, granted, your municipal wells may be 100 feet below that. So you could ask, well, who cares about this difference? The reason this matters is these are springs. These are farms. These are people's livelihood. Many domestic wells are much shallower than this. And so this delta, this difference matters. Risks also come in this form of industrial development. This should really be framed as petrochemical development. One example here on the Kanawha River. There are many things that we benefit from petrochemical development, but there also are risks associated with that. We heard about PFAS, forever chemicals. That's one of those that we have to be careful about because we know with high confidence the carcinogenicity and real health risks associated with exposure to forever chemicals. Got to know, we have to understand those risks and manage them. Okay. Oil and gas development. Now, this is one that we have to have eyes on because this is, I would say, an emerging space for research. The radioactivity associated with some of these brines, flowback waters, can be very significant. And the disposal of those brines can be very difficult and very important. For example, I'm working currently with colleagues at the Charleston Gazette to conduct a statewide survey of groundwater quality. And one of the unfortunate but real findings that we see in the central part of West Virginia, where, quite frankly, we have very little data because the municipal water suppliers there, this is all surface water. So there's been very little samples. There's not enough productive groundwater there to produce enough water to justify, a municipal groundwater system in the central part of the state. So really, there's been very little data from that region. And the new data that we see coming in, some of the samples show very clearly evidence of oil and gas brine in domestic groundwater that people are being exposed to every day. We see high barium numbers, extraordinary barium numbers. Conductivity numbers that are several fold over what you would expect. Conductivity, of course, is a measure of the dissolved ionic material in water. The natural streams for central West Virginia would be something like 100 units, and what we see is people exposed to, drinking water that's 7,300 units. So that's a challenge. It's a risk. We have to understand that. Oil and gas development. Well, this looks like an interesting polka dots design. Let me give you a framework for this. This is the density of oil and gas wells and disposal sites in just one little chunk of the state. It's just to demonstrate that there's a high intensity of this particular type of land use. We benefit from some of these things. We have to be honest about that. But we also have to manage the risks. We have to manage those risks. Surface mining is another part of it. This is a creek chub with selenium poisoning. Fun fact, yesterday on the Senate or the House floor, an amendment was introduced to protect West Virginia water quality standards based on selenium, based on some of the research I've done. Spoiler alert, or not really spoiler alert, it happened yesterday. The amendment didn't pass. We are interested in better water quality standards because we think that West Virginians deserve clean water and it comes in from the source. And let me flesh that out a little bit more. Before I do though, here's an example of the kind of obvious impacts of acid mine drainage. Here we can see iron oxide. This is old news for folks in the coal fields, as well as, towards the northern part of the state in the Cheat River system where we do see massive acid mine drainage there compared to adjoining stream without those impacts. We know how to treat this. we can treat this with lime, we can treat this with buffers, but it's a life's work. It takes eternal vigilance. But organizations like Friends of the Cheat and other groups on the ground are making that happen. We have the technology to fix this, but it takes money, it takes time, it takes work. Data centers were also developed. This is one on the landscape we need to be honest about. There's a lot to this. As was mentioned earlier, there can be technological optimizations to minimize those impacts on water. But one important thing that we should know, if you go to the data center hotspot of the world, which is Loudoun County, Virginia, just stone's throw away over the Blue Ridge right here, and you compare what they're doing in terms of their water management versus what's being proposed in West Virginia, for data centers, that's night and day. Night and day. In my view, the data centers that are proposed for Tucker County, the water management there would never be permitted in Loudoun County. Just to think about that. Why should West Virginians be told or expected to accept less than our neighbors in Virginia in terms of water security? That doesn't sound right to me. I think we can do better than that. Unfortunately, there's a challenge in the West Virginia legislature to deal with this. Last cycle, they passed House Bill 2014, which essentially stripped local governance from any role in the siting or planning or management or oversight of these facilities. We think we can do better than that. There will be an amendments process in the Senate in the next few days. We hope that moves forward. There's an opportunity to do better. So data centers are part of it. And it's not just water quantity, it's also water quality. We know that biocides and other processing materials are used. That has to be discharged. So we need to be smart about it. We just need to be intelligent about it. But I should also say, while we're at it, I have a nuanced view of data centers and AI because I build tools with AI to empower local communities to do science. I've built models that enable anglers to go into a stream, take a picture of a brook trout, and then use AI tools to identify that brook trout to the individual level. It's profound. What that does is it's like facial recognition, but it's sort of official recognition, right? Oh, wow. And what that does is a partnership with Trout Unlimited. What it does is it allows anglers to be part of the science so that they can they're invested in it. They're part of it, and they're doing what we call mark recapture study. This is basically a population biology estimate. So we can estimate the total number of fish through anglers going back. It's enabled by these tools. So I think we need to be honest that there is utility, there's power, and there's a leveling of the playing field here for small organizations like ours. But we have to be intelligent about it and manage those risks. Chemical spills is also part of the story in West Virginia. Of course, the Elk River in 2014 is a big story. This was a chemical spill immediately upstream from the water intake at Charleston, West Virginia on the Elk. Many, many people, communities displaced, lost their water. Interestingly, the day or the week after this happened, the West Virginia legislature came together and with one voice said, we can do better than this. And they passed the Above Ground Storage Tank Act, which essentially, common sense, it requires inspection of these above ground storage tanks in a zone of critical concern, right? If you're near an intake, you should look at your tanks. That bill was unanimously supported, and every cycle since then, there's been an effort to dismantle it. And with the West Virginia Rivers Coalition and partners, we have succeeded in keeping the integrity of this act. Now, eternal vigilance, right? Also recently, unfortunately, there's some news from Wayne County, which we might hear more about here in a minute with our next presenter, but a transformer spill from an AEP substation has polluted municipal water in the town of Wayne. These are total hydrocarbon VOCs and petrochemical contaminants in municipal water. That's dangerous, and we need to, we are working with the community there to provide testing and interpretation, but the town is really taking the lead, of course, as they should, on fixing this problem. But there is an economic and social justice issue here. There is, this is a well water sample. It's just not right. Another thing to know is that in southern West Virginia, there was a paper published recently in Risk Analysis, and here's the punchline. highest rates of water quality violations nationwide in southern West Virginia. Okay, southern West Virginia, and this is why. If you look at the reason for those water quality violations, we're talking about municipal supplies. It was this. It was chlorine disinfectant byproducts, and I couldn't help but notice. Look, this hits home. Here's the current local paper, the Morgan Messenger. And congratulations, we've got great ink here. 35th water tasting, worldwide water, love it. But above that, this is connected. Sewer officials to pursue grant for northern extension of utility. This is the same story in a way, right? The management of our septic and our sewage, et cetera, is connected to the quality of our surface waters and the quality of our drinking water, because these disinfectant byproducts are necessary, often a necessary byproduct of the bacterial contamination that comes through by poor management of our landscape. And this is not a new problem. This is an old problem in Appalachia, but it's something that we see clearly and we want to connect so that we can work on it coherently. So let's pivot to the resiliencies part, okay? There's a whole litany of risks. Let's talk about the resiliencies a little bit. And this is what I would encourage you to take from this talk. Ecosystems are infrastructure. Ecosystems are infrastructure. Forests do work. Wetlands do work. This is Canaan Valley. These places do work. We think of them as ecosystem services. They're minimizing downstream flooding. They're purifying water. And of course, it's fantastic habitat as well. A destination for visitors to our fantastic state, the Mountain State. Also, we can zoom out a little bit. And if you'll indulge me, this is the big picture stuff. Not as big as Pat, but it's almost as quite there. We're good there. This is a big picture. Let's think about the whole history of everything we know on Earth 4.6 billion years ago, boom. Let's put it in context. Why is this relevant contemporarily? Well, 350 million years ago, we have limestone, dolostone deposition in this region. I'll explain why that's important. Then, millions of years after that, this was the ancestral Appalachian Mountains. The ancestral Appalachians forming there, and of course now, which otherwise is known as all of human history. Okay, so let's start with this. Why is this relevant for today? This was an ancient shallow sea before the original Appalachian Mountains emerged, which they emerged primarily by smashing into Africa, which I think is somewhat rude, and I'm pretty sure they didn't get a permit from West Virginia DEP to do that. Ancient shallow seas. These were the most advanced forms of life at that time, okay? Generations of shells living and dying, falling and compressing, living and dying, falling and compressing. It's the calcium carbonate in that material that produces limestone. And even weirder, the edges of those shallow seas, there was a different chemical reaction that grabbed seawater, locked it into rock to produce the magnesium in dolostone. Those two different rocks are very similar, but they have enough of a different chemical composition that one fractures in a little bit of a different way than the other. And that means, for today, that water moves differently through those things. Calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate, those ancient stories matter for us today because they dictate how water moves in places like Morgan County, parts of Morgan County, a lot of Berkeley County, and much of Jefferson County, as well as big chunks of the Shenandoah Valley, where we have limestone and karst. Limestone and karst the karst terrain is a sort of a blessing and a curse. It is the reality of where we are. High mineral content, of course, but it presents both risks and resiliencies. We can think about, of course, we recognize the existence of Virginia here, but these sort of bands of these features, if you look out on farm fields or in the forest, you'll see these things tipped upright. So the ledges used to be flat, they're tipped upright. Well, that happened when smashed into Africa, et cetera, add a couple million years, and then add rainfall, which naturally dissolves these materials a little bit. Rainfall is slightly acidic, a natural chemical reaction, and voila, we get these features underground. Okay, and these characterize the landscape. Here's Jefferson County. There are some very intense regions of sinkholes under our feet. As was mentioned earlier, the subsidence. That's one of the reasons that groundwater level that we looked at, and that's why it matters. When you drop that groundwater level chronically, you have land subsiding because it's easier to crush a cube of air than it is to crush a cube of water. Okay. Also, right here under our feet, this is another part of it. There's a limestone lens that cruises right here through Umpqua Mountain, and that dictates the way that water moves. Now, it's a little bit distinct here. We have a very unique feature, of course, because the geothermal heating associated with part of that groundwater path produces some very warm and unique water. But in general, that karst terrain is going to be characterizing, it's going to be conveying resiliency from heat. And I don't want to go too far into the weeds here with these plots, but these are some samples I've taken around the region. But here's the point. If you look at this line, so here's a summer, for example. Every plot's a different site. This line is the air temperature for a summer, and the black line is the water temperature. And you can see that where you have karst being absent, these lines coincide. So the water is very sensitive to the air temperature change. And as air temperature continues to rise, we anticipate more sensitivity to this. However, these places that are spring creeks, dominated by groundwater, dominated by karst flow, they tend to be more resilient. Yeah, air temperature's going up and down, they don't care. They're more resilient. They're dictated by the groundwater dynamic more than the surface water or the air temperature dynamic, which, by the way, has local implications, right? For example, this Route 22 bypass just around the corner here, Warm Springs Watershed Association's been doing great work. They're monitoring this, and we can look at temperatures, and the fact that karst is relatively resilient is a good thing from having a stream cut not roast the stream because it's dominated by groundwater dynamics more than air temperature. So there's resiliency. This is like the resiliency of the earth talking. And this is a good thing. And in fact, it's kind of strange to say it, but I think it's true. The high elevation streams in the highlands of West Virginia, Monongahela National Forest, beautiful, fantastic, clean water. Those streams are often very shallow, and the groundwater influences there are very shallow. And as a consequence, they're very sensitive to air temperature change. So I predict that these spring creeks around us right here may be some of the last cold places. It's strange to think of it that way. But as air temperature continues to increase in the mountains, the sensitivity of those places will continue to climb. Because we are less sensitive to air temperature here in the valley, we may be protected in a way. So that's the story of karst, and it's a story of the limestone. Also, we need to change our thinking. This compels us to change the way we think about landscapes. Here's a small case study here from my home of Shepherdstown. This is Town Run. Here's Town Run Spring House. Of course, there's a rich cultural history with here, the Beeline March and all sorts of fantastic Revolutionary War history and so much more. And here's the Potomac River, which cruises through this way. Well, this is Town Run. This is the secondary drinking water supply for the town of Shepherdstown. The primary source is the river. They're soon going to be blending these water sources, which is interesting. And so people are interested in source water planning for this place as Town Run water moves down here to the water plant, the intake down there. This is what we think of as the zone of critical concern. This is a product of the Above Ground Storage Tank Act, right? Look upstream from those intakes and, do some inspections of large storage tanks, develop conservation plans. It's really common sense, but that's the zone in which we're sort of doing that. But look, in karst, it's different. So I want to introduce you to this idea. We've heard of a watershed. We all know what that means, overland flow into a stream. But it's really, in karst, it's more about the groundwater shed. I hate jargon, but I think this one is worth keeping around. The groundwater shed, because this gets us to think about where our exposure is to contaminants. It's not locally in this place. We're not so much worried about immediate runoff. We're more interested in what's happening here in Clark County, Virginia, what's happening here in Shenandoah Junction, South County. There's been some really impressive and very important dye tracing work by USGS and others, where you dip dye, non-toxic dye, into a sinkhole, and you find it emerges in locations to the north, in locations to the northeast. So you can trace the flow of groundwater, and it has a lot to do with the fracture, and the fracture traces, the way that rocks are cracked, the conduits underground. We are standing on a system of pipes. Okay, so to wrap this up, let's talk about resiliency from a community perspective. Community science and empowerment. We had an important collaboration. We still have an important collaboration with Trout Unlimited, native brook trout. We've worked with them and with the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection and the Division of Natural Resources to expand our designated trout water. This started with anglers going out. We know these streams are trout streams, but they're not recognized as such. Well, we care about this because when you designate trout streams appropriately, you increase your water quality standards for those places, right? Aluminum, for example, one of the, an important water quality standard strengthened with the reality of community science, starting with anglers. Very cool. Here's candy darter. People haven't seen this. This is a native fish in West Virginia. There are conservation plans that are protecting forests, which protect downstream waters, protect municipalities, and it looks like a tropical fish. It's really cool. That's candy darter. This is a male in breeding colors. This is in the Greenbrier watershed, so this is a tributary to the new system, southern part of the state, an endemic species. In fact, a listed species under the Endangered Species Act as a threatened species. But that's motivating conservation action, and that protects water. We also have a tool you should know. There's a QR code here. This is a simple tool that anyone can use to document water quality conditions, anything you can see, and document with a phone. This tool is helpful, and we can develop reports to DEP to work with inspectors to figure out these problems. That's been very effective, and it builds a collaborative relationship with the Department of Environmental Protection. It also gives power into the hands, in the hands of communities, because let's face it, we're carrying around extraordinarily powerful technology in our pockets. So the question is, how do we use it to lift people up and to give people tools? We also have community monitoring stuff. There's work happening in Warm Springs here, as I mentioned. Also in Turkey Run, in places in Jefferson County, all sorts of volunteers, a lot of data are being collected, hundreds of sites, thousands of surveys. We're also developing tools online. We are harnessing state data and making it, I know this is shocking, but making data accessible and understandable. Wow. So that is ongoing work. We're going to launch this website, Interactive Tools, demystify water data. That's our goal, demystify it, make it relevant. And as I mentioned, water policy advocacy is a big part of what we do. One thing I've learned, and I want to leave you with this, is that truly that we are being inundated with noise. We all know this. We're being told that we're separate or different, or they're them and you're there and we're different, we're not in. No. Water throws that away and focuses our eyes on exactly what the truth is. We are all drinking from the same cup. We're all in it together. I have seen political alliances, cultural alliances, people coming together that otherwise would never have anything to say about each other. Never. But then you see people get together, and I know a lot of this is Jefferson County, for example. I know these people wouldn't have anything to do with each other, and now they're all aligned for a common purpose and for water. I think that's beautiful, and I want to leave you with that. This is what we're trying to do, and I really just want to celebrate this event, and thank you all for being here, and thank you all for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I told you we could go on and on. I mean, every speaker so far has just been fantastic. But I know you all need a quick break, and that's what we're going to do. 10, 15 minutes max, and then we're going to come back here because we got a lot more to cover. So thank you all. Go do what you need to do and come right back. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know you're all in these fantastic conversations. I really hate to interrupt, but we have to keep going because we have limited time. So if you can all please take your seats, and we're going to start here in just a minute because you're going to be so cooperative that you're just going to go, shoo, and we're going to get to start, right? Right? Don't make me use my mom voice. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please, please, please take your seats. We're going to get started here. And this guy, the next guy up, I happen to know he's ex-military and police. And if you don't sit down soon, he's going to really, well, I don't know what he'll do actually. But I wouldn't want to find out because he's a big guy. So welcome back to water tasting, Berkeley Springs International Water Tasting. I want to thank our sponsors, but you've seen them, the Town of Bath, Peak Health, and well, it's all in the program. It's on, we've been showing it on the live stream. I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to introduce this next guy. And you know what? I was supposed to bring my paper up here with me and I didn't. So I happen to know that he is representing our Lifetime Achievement Award winner, who is DigDeep, and George McGraw, who founded DigDeep, but George couldn't be here. But the really good news is that this guy is from Southern West Virginia, and he's the director of the Appalachian Project down in McDowell County. Now, a lot of you, I don't know how many of you have ever been to any other parts of West Virginia. I have. And when we moved here, people said, oh, you're going to the upper class section of West Virginia. But where this guy comes from, it's a whole different world. And I'm going to let him tell you about it and let him tell you about the great work that DigDeep is doing in McDowell County on behalf of all people everywhere. Take it away, George. George Foreman.
Thank you all. Get my bearings here. I want to start by thanking the hosts here, the hotel, beautiful historic hotel, and the town itself, Berkeley Springs. I'm a lifelong West Virginian. I've never been to Berkeley Springs. It's such a cool little place. I've spent most of my career in the southern part of the state and had very few opportunities to come to the Eastern Panhandle. I'm really glad to be here. And I want to thank you all for having me represent DigDeep and the Appalachian Water Project. We're involved in a lot of things in southern West Virginia and eastern Kentucky. To give you just a kind of a background on the Appalachian Water Project and DigDeep as a whole, we're a nonpartisan organization. We work nationwide in different areas throughout the country, and we are a human rights organization that has the very basic mission to close the water access gap in America. There's over 2 million people in this country that don't have access to clean running water and sanitation, and that's what we're here to try to fix. You know, to start, you know, this is a great event. My first time here, first time in town, but it's a celebration of water. Everything about water. You all know much more about the judging of it than I do. I'm kind of in a different wheelhouse, but we celebrate the taste, the clarity, the different profiles of water. But many folks in the Appalachian region, southern West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, and our other work areas, they have a very different view on water. They worry about the safety of it. Most people, you know, I have clean running water now. I don't worry about the safety of it. We have, where we work, there's contaminated wells. They're hauling water. They're literally running water lines out of old mine shafts and drinking this water. It's a very, very different situation for a lot of folks in Kentucky. So they worry about the safety. They worry about the affordability. When you don't have clean running water, municipal water, how do you get it? They're hauling it. Some of them are hauling it. They have large tanks in the back of their truck, so they have to travel. They're using gas money, wear and tear on the vehicle, just to get water. So they'll go to a filling point, if they're lucky enough to have a tank like that in the back of the truck, bring it back to their house and have like a cistern system to use that water. And access, lots of areas that we're working, there's no water access. Again, there's bad wells, many wells that people don't test, springs that aren't tested, and it's just a real struggle for a lot of people in the areas we work. You know, this morning, I left my house. I live south of Berkeley, and I just want everybody to think kind of through what I'm about to say. Again, I have clean running water. Think about your habits every morning. You get up, take a shower, flush the toilets, make a pot of coffee, all the things that we take for granted where we're working. A lot of people don't have that access. So it's just something to keep in mind in some of the struggles of some of the areas that we do work in. And, I will say the people in southern West Virginia and eastern Kentucky where we work, they are tough, gritty people. They're used to hardships. They're used to it. But we fundamentally believe that everyone should have access to clean running water. It's a basic human right. And even though they're tough and gritty and they're going to get by, we certainly want to help as many people as we can. So with that, we'll skip through two. Too far. I must have been.
This is the slides that I got. Hope they work.
Yeah, this is fine.
Okay.
So I mentioned the water access gap. That's our basic mission, to close the water access gap in America. What is the water access gap? The water access gap is simply the people that don't have access to clean running water and sanitation in this country. They're relying on untested wells, bad water. They're straight piping sewer into the environment. This is very, very prevalent in southern West Virginia. The town that I grew up in, Clinton, West Virginia, well, now they have a municipal system, but when I was a kid, every sewer system went straight into the Elk River, and you have kids playing in it, fishing in it. It's not a good situation, and there's still a lot of people in the areas that we work that still face that every day. So we are a community-led team. DigDeep hires within the community. We're based out of California, but everyone on our project teams are locals. And again, we've talked about a little bit about hauling water, contaminated water, wells, people that don't have access. They have a hard time flushing their commode. If you don't have water, how do you flush your commode? Well, lots of them are gathering it in like makeshift cisterns beside the house, carrying it into their house just to flush toilets and that kind of thing. So just a lot of challenges with that. To dig a little deeper, into the health aspect at the bottom, how does the lack of water access affect health? Again, untested well water, bad well water, aquifer water from abandoned coal mines. These are the places a lot of these people are getting their water source from. I'm not an expert on the testing of water or anything like that, but I certainly can't imagine water straight from a mine shaft or untested well water or any kind of untested spring water would be good for you. There's certainly health aspects of it. There's health problems, dental problems. When you have those kind of problems, their bills go up. They have, they're trying to pay dental bills, they're trying to pay medical bills. And this is some of the hardest hit area of the region. There's high unemployed. There's not many jobs in the area. A lot of the coal mining industry has left a lot of it. So there's just a lot of there's a lot of issues with affordability and health issues paying for those things in our region when you don't have access to water. We talk about dignity. If a child goes to school that's unbathed, not having their clothes washed, that type thing, it's certainly a dignity issue. their parents going to work with dirty clothes on, not bathed. Or if they are bathing, they're having to carry water in to bathtubs, whatever, just to get by. And daily life. How does not having water affect daily life? It costs them more. You know, they're having to haul water, they're using their trucks, they're having to use gas, wear and tear on the vehicles, time away from their family. It affects everything about the way of life. Just sit here and really think about it. If you didn't have a working toilet, your faucet didn't turn on in the morning, you didn't have access to make a pot of coffee or take a shower, just think about how life is or would be under those circumstances. So that's certainly the thing that DigDeep and the Appalachian Water Project is trying to bridge that gap and fix some of these problems. So why does the issue exist? You know, we mentioned Southern West Virginia. Southern West Virginia was built on coal. In many of these areas, you know, they were small boom towns. You know, back in the heyday of coal, the coal mines built these communities. They built the houses, they built the stores, they maintained the infrastructure. They completely maintained them. They built theaters for the communities, schools for the communities. Well, when coal declined and they pulled out, infrastructure started crumbling. The houses started going down. There were no jobs, higher poverty, all the things that when those jobs left, the quality of life went down. So now what we face in Southern West Virginia, if there was a water or sewer infrastructure system, they're failing. We're actually in a community called Rodale, West Virginia, in southern Raleigh County right now. That's the exact problem. It was a booming little town back in its day. The entire system is failing and crumbling now. And thank God they got the money to put a new system in. And we're going in and doing all the homeowners connections for those folks right now. We've probably got 50 houses done and about another 20 to go in Rodale. But that's just one example of many. And then, you know, when you have infrastructure failing, it's very expensive to maintain. These local public districts don't have the manpower or the funding to really maintain the system. So they patch them up the best they can and keep them going as long as they can, but ultimately the cost is just too great and they can't maintain them. You know, and that's a quote at the bottom: where you live, you should not determine whether you have access to safe water. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of specific people that we helped very recently in the last 6 or 8 months. There was a gentleman in McDowell County, lifelong resident there. He's a bus driver, lived in the same house for 50 years, never had access to clean drinking water. He had a makeshift system. It was an old mine. From his house, you go down a little valley, up the side of the mountain. In that side of the mountain was an old abandoned coal mine. He ran his own water system straight out of that mine and pumped it into his house. He's getting up in age now. He couldn't maintain it. He had never tested it. And as a matter of fact, he said when it got low in the summer, he could literally taste coal in the water. So he was lucky enough to be, I don't know, probably 1,500 feet from a main line, got a hold of us, and we got his water line put in for him. First time access. Well, he had never had public water access in his life. Another, it's a tragedy, but it's also a blessing. This elderly gentleman, kind of the same situation as before. We went in and got his water line taken care of. He had never had access to public water in his life, and he was in his 80s. He died a month after we got him public water. But his son lived with him, and it went on, that gift was passed down to his son, which is still living there. So just another example of many that of some of the things we do. The program overview, I've talked a lot about it, and I got to keep a close eye on tail. We got plenty of time. So we focus on kind of 4 different areas. Water access, sanitation, which means septic, sewer, that kind of thing, community partnerships, and we're piloting a home water range system. So water access, some of the things that we're doing right now, we're working in new areas. We're in Rodale, West Virginia. We're in Fayette County. People don't realize some of the severity of the water issues. We're on a major water project in Fayette County, 10 minutes from the national National Park. Never had water. They've been, and just struggling horribly, you know. They've been trying to get it 20, 30, 40 years, and some of them are finally getting it. Some of them are still going to be left out of the system. So that's called the New Haven Water Project. Last Mile Water Project in Eastern Kentucky. That's another water project. These folks never had water. It's not an old dilapidated system. They never had water. We're actively working there, and we should finish that project within, I'm hoping, the next 6 months. You know, with these new water systems, whether it's Rodale, New Haven, wherever we are, mostly something people don't really think about is fire suppression. They don't have fire suppression for their houses or forest fires or whatever it may be. And I'm going to use Rodale as an example. They had an old water system that's failing that we're replacing currently, but they didn't have fire protection. If a house caught on fire, there was a little tiny creek that ran through Rodale, the fire department would have to come and pump the water out of the creek to put out a fire. Well, in the summer, the creek went dry. So there was no fire protection. So that's another system. With this new system, they're going to have complete fire protection, hydrants, that kind of thing, which also should lower insurance rates. It alleviates some of the financial burden. And one other, when it comes to water access, this is a pilot project for us. We're going to build 2 full home rainwater systems. It's a rainwater catchment collection system built by a company out of Roanoke, Virginia called Rainwater Management Solutions. Really cool company, very high tech. I think they're probably the best in the industry at rainwater catchment. So this system basically comes off the roof into a series of filters, carbon filter, paper filters, an exterior filter, through a UV light into a 1,500 gallon storage tank and pumped into the house for drinkable, potable water. So we're going to build 2 this year, test the water for them. You know, we're going to test it for 6 months or a year to make sure everything's up and running, and hopefully move forward with more of those systems. Because the fact is, Southern West Virginia is so rugged, there's certain homes that are never going to get public water. They're just too far back in the mountains. So this would be a solution if this system works, that hopefully we could scale. And looks like really high quality components, and we're really excited to get those things built. Sanitation, another area that we really focus on. Again, there's a lot of straight piping in Southern West Virginia and Eastern Kentucky, and on our other project areas out west and in Southern Texas. So we focus on building septic systems, if a new septic system goes through a town, we go in and do the homeowner's connections free of charge. Anything we do, if we take on the project, is free to the customer. Everything from like the meter into the house, home water rain systems, it's all free to the customer. And while we're talking about cost, you know, I've went over some of the, you know, there's a lot of unemployed people in West Virginia, people that are on fixed incomes, elderly people that are living on very little Social Security, that kind of thing. A very, very basic water line, the easiest one we'd ever do. If we ran it from here to that wall, super easy. It's about $2,500. Well, if you're living on $800 a month for Social Security, a $2,500 water line is out of your reach. So just to put that into perspective, it's expensive work, and yeah, we're moving forward one step at a time with all these connections we're making. Within sanitation, we got several projects going. We got an EPA grant to install 35 septic systems in McDowell County, which we're underway with that. The Yeager Sewer Project. Yeager was another big booming coal town back in the day. They've been the entire town straight pipes into the river there. They got the funding to get a complete new municipal system, and we've actively started. We hired a contractor, and he's actively putting in those homeowner lines right now. And, you know, a statistic that I learned from the health inspector in McDowell County, we work very closely with him on these septic systems and the septic work. The average household uses 90,000 gallons a year of wastewater, 90,000 gallons per house. So if we're able to put 35 septic systems in, And on the Yeager Sewer project, I'm going to throw out an average of 50 homes. That saves over 7 million gallons a year of wastewater from going into the rivers and the environment. So it's a huge impact. Community partnerships and stakeholder meetings, we've really increased those in the last year and starting to pay dividends. So who do we partner with? We partner with the local public service districts, local engineers working on these projects, mayors of these towns, county commissions. And the reason we do that, it coordinates our work better. So if we're working with the engineers building these systems, they know 2, 3, 4 years out of when the system should be getting built. Now, there's obviously tons of delays and nothing ever goes on time with these projects, but they have eyes on these projects years in advance. So we work with them to try to get eyes on the projects so we can figure out if we want to try to get involved with a particular project or not. So we've really increased those meetings. In the last year, we've expanded into 4 new counties. Again, on New Haven's a new project, Rodell's a new project. We're on a new project in Kentucky, or different area, I should say. And these community meetings and stakeholder meetings, they're really paying dividends. I'm getting personal phone calls in Bluefield, West Virginia from Lewis County saying, hey, there's a new water system going in Lewis County. Can you help us? Word is starting to kind of get around of the issue and what we're trying to fix here. So it takes, just a lot of people don't know of the issue in Appalachia, on the Navajo Nation, and in southern Texas, where we have very active projects as well. Some of the facts, and this is just for the Appalachia Water Project. We have served over 850 households. That includes water connections, sewer connections, septic systems, and McDowell County had a massive flood I think it was last March when that happened. So when that happened, was massive water infrastructure damage done in that county. So we jumped straight in with the local PSD. So those numbers include the flood work. I think just DigDeep or AWP connected roughly 150 or 160 households in McDowell County just from that flood event that did all the infrastructure damage. So that includes all those numbers. We're working in 6 counties now: McDowell, Raleigh, Fayette, and Summers in West Virginia, and Naughton, Letcher County in Kentucky. The Summers County project is Jumping Branch. It hadn't started yet, but it's been funded, it's underway, and we're hoping to get involved with that. I'm already going to all the meetings and that kind of thing with the engineers, and our team's involved with that project. 2 regional offices. Our headquarters is out of Bluefield, and we also work out of Kentucky. A little distinction, our Bluefield office has our own work crew, we have our own equipment, but we also contract jobs too. So as an example, our own crew is working in Rodell, and we have contractors working on the Yeager Sewer project simultaneously. Our Kentucky team, they don't have a work crew. Everything they do is contract work. They do the same type of work, focusing more on water, but they hire local contractors for all their work. Community-led. DigDeep is it's a really cool organization. We're headquartered in Los Angeles. We have people working all across the country, whether it's in development, fundraising, programs. We have a policy team that's trying to reach DC and to get real policy change. But they hire locally, whether it's the Navajo Water Project, Appalachia Project, or the Texas Colonias, everyone are local on these projects. And it makes sense. You're in these communities working, hiring local. You already kind of have some sort of trust with the people. People from Southern West Virginia, you know the culture, the way people operate. There's already an inherent sense of trust, when we come in, because what we do, everything is free for the customer. How much in life is for free out here? Nothing. And people don't believe it. They think you're going to put in a $10,000 water line for me? No way. But then it happens, And most of that is from private donations. We do get some grants, but most of it's private donations. There's a lot of people that believe in what we're doing and let us serve these communities. Let's see here. And, a lot of the folks, I don't know the percentage, I've heard it in team meetings. A lot of the folks that work for DigDeep and Appalachia, all the program teams, they personally have lived with water inequality, no water, no station. They personally lived it, which that in itself, you become more passionate about what you do and you want to help the community you lived in. And I was an example of that. I didn't have sewer access in Clendenin. Our farm in Clay County, a very rural area, there was no water. We had a well, but it went bad. So we were using a little tiny spring to water cattle, and we drank out of it. Never tested, it's just the way it was. There was no water at that time. Now there is, but that was an area that was straight piping and had no water access. So a lot of our folks have lived the problems we're trying to fix, which is really cool. It makes them passionate about the job and really want to get things done. Got about 7 minutes. We'll start getting through this. Our work is really simple. Just like the folks I mentioned that never had water access. If they have if there's a water main near them and say they have a well gone bad, all they have to do is call our office, leave a message, whatever. We'll get back with them. It's a very simple system. They'll meet with our team. Our team will go out to the house, look at it, see if it's a project that's feasible, get materials lists, that kind of thing. We do a basic survey of the household to get their basic information. And if it's something that we can do, we go back and do the work. It's a pretty simple system. It's a little different on these major. We call those individual one-offs. So, like I said, if they have access to a public water line and they want us to connect them, that would be kind of we call them individual one-offs. Now, the bigger projects, like the one where we're doing 50 homes or 75 houses, like I said, we're working with the engineer teams, the PSD, the public service districts well in advance. And then with the homeowners, we go through this very simple system when they're kind of ready to connect. This is one of our guys in Rodell, West Virginia. It's hard work. It's very hard work. It's demanding. This was taken about 3 weeks ago. I don't know what the temperature was. I was there that day. It was probably about 35 degrees. What actually happened here, so they have an active water system, the one that's failing. So we're putting in all the new lines. So they're using our trenching machine and cut the old water line, which is active. So instantly the ditch fills up. I don't know what the temperature of the water is when it's 35 or 40 degrees out, but it's very cold. He had to physically get down in that water, basically blindfolded. He can't see what he's doing, and piece that broken line back together with valves. Can't see anything to get that shut off, or it just keeps on flowing. It would never shut off if he hadn't done that. But just so, it's very challenging work. We run into a lot of rock. We're in the southern mountains of West Virginia. It's rocky, it's steep. There's a lot of danger to it. But our guys they're very good at what they do. And there's just a lot of challenges with this work, physically getting this stuff in. So just one recent example of Bucky Osborne doing his thing there. These are two of our other guys from Bluefield. I was in this meeting. So what this was, we were working on the septic project where we're trying to install the septic systems. And we were literally pulling up maps with the local health department, finding houses that we think will work for these systems. McDowell County straight pipes, 60 or 70% of the homes straight pipe in the entire county. So you would think it'd be very, very easy to install 35 septic systems. Well, there's a lot of regulations put in a septic system. You have to be so many feet off a stream. You have to be so many feet off the road, so many feet off property boundaries, so many feet off a well. These are cold camps. These are little houses along roadways in marching order, basically. Many of the homes won't take a septic system. The physical requirements aren't there. So the only solution is a municipal system, which is big dollars. So, the only solution is bringing in a municipal system and doing the entire community. But that's some of the challenges that we faced with this project. When I first got, the grant, I was like, this is going to be super easy. We'll have these 35 in like 2 months. It's not working that way. We're having to dig a lot more to find people that will take it, but we're going to get there. This is Joe Morton. He's our project officer in Kentucky, and that's the mayor, one of the mayors that we have a good relationship with. And that's just an example of a stakeholder meeting where we meet with mayors, we meet with all these folks to line up our work well in advance. These locals know where the problems are. They know the pockets that don't have water access, and we try to build the best relationship we can with them and work with them to try to get water and sewer access in these areas. Just a little quote that I came up with. We're sampling and scoring water, but in where we work in the southern part of West Virginia and eastern Kentucky, it's a much different situation. They have to boil it, use bottled water, which is very expensive. And a lot of their water systems, these wells, these aquifers, the coal mine aquifers, the springs, they're scared to drink water. They don't have any choice. It's just as simple as that. Bottom left picture, that's another one of our stakeholder meetings for the septic system. I don't know if anybody, I'm a little older guy these days. I've never heard of this guy, but has anybody ever heard of Mr. Beast?
Oh, yeah.
The center picture, we were featured in a Mr. Beast video.
Wow.
He's the biggest YouTuber, I guess, in the world. I'd never heard of him until this project, but he did a worldwide, everybody between like the age of 15 and 30 knows who he is, but like everybody above 50, they don't know who this guy is. But so that was where we were featured. He did a worldwide water project to raise awareness and raise money at a worldwide scale. And that video raised $41 million and had over 96 million views on YouTube to raise money for water projects around the world. The final picture on the right, that was during the flood last year in McDowell County. Volunteers out cleaning up their community. It was a massive flood, massive infrastructure damage, and they were cleaning up a little local park there in Welch. I said we were a nationwide nonprofit. Of course, I'm with the Appalachian Water Project in West Virginia and Kentucky. We also work on 3 states out west on the Navajo Water Project. And again, all those folks are hired locally. And then the Colonias Water Project, which is in southern Texas, kind of down on the Mexico border. We also have teams of people working on many of the same issues that we're working on in Appalachia. But around the country, this is not just where all of our employees are located. We have employees all around the country. Again, we're headquartered in Los Angeles. We have people in Colorado, Virginia Beach. We have policy teams around Washington, D.C., trying to get policy change. So we're working all around the country. This is my last slide. This is who we are. You can check out our website. We're on social media. Again, that's my name. I left a bunch of cards back on the table leaving, and I'm gonna leave you all with one. I told you this problem was solvable in our lifetime. That's DigDeep's core mission, is to fix this problem in our lifetime. I did some rough math. The U.S. budget, if we spread out some rough math, the U.S. budget, if we spread out the entire U.S. budget over a 10-year period, it would cost 1% to fix this problem across the country. You spread that out to 20 years, which is in some of our lifetimes, it goes down to about 0.4 to 0.7% of the U.S. budget to fix this problem for all. So with that, I appreciate everything. I appreciate y'all's time. I'm a little bit over. I'm gonna.
You want to take just a couple of questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
A couple of minutes.
Absolutely.
At what point do you say no? Do you ever do that? Because let's say you highlighted the Southwest, and it frustrates me to no end the diversion of the Colorado River to really hydrate Las Vegas, which shouldn't really exist. And so how do you, well, I mean, why are we continuing to divert while others are suffering when they have the money to source their own solution? Why does their existence cause the suffering for so many in that area?
You know,
That's not cool.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
And the other contrast is, at what point do you have outcrops of civilization from a community to go on their own? And, you know, is it the combination of their waste affecting others downstream, which causes the need to go in municipality, for municipality system or solution?
Well, it would certainly
When you say
pollute it.
no.
Yeah, it would certainly pollute it downstream. I mean, you know, I look back on my childhood, everything was straight pipe, straight toward Charleston. Everything from north of Charleston was coming that direction on the Elk River, from Clay County, Braxton County, all the way down. To answer your question, we do have to tell people no, because we're not an organization with 20,000 people. We are limited. We're limited by budget. And we have had to turn down major projects just because we don't have the reach
Do
to
you do that? Do you advise to relocate?
Do we what?
Do you advise them to relocate? I mean, what?
I personally don't. I mean,
Hey, you're not allowed to do this here.
you know, I don't, you know, that's ultimately, that's their personal choice. You know, some people move into areas that they know there is no water, you know, but they deal with it. Some people
And therefore,
move in.
it's not the state's responsibility, in my opinion.
Right.
To
Yeah.
fund that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I've had to turn down several major projects just because it's so great. You know, you think of Southern West Virginia, it's more concentrated in Southern West Virginia and Eastern Kentucky. But again, I've got phone calls from, I'm trying to think of it's in Lewis County, a major water project where they never had water. You know, you don't think of it that far north. I got a call about a major sewer project in Webster County, still straight piping there, you know, so, you know, we are limited by budget, manpower, and we certainly can't do everything. I think that's why it's really important for everyone. You know, our policy folks are really, we're making a big push to get awareness of the subject. And we're making a big push. I met with a state senator just a week or so ago. We're going to build more relationships with state senators in the state. It's really important. You know, if you know policymakers in your area, talk about what we have going on. You know, a lot of them don't even know the problem. They're not familiar with it, you know. And so the more awareness that we can get out, the better. But ultimately, it's going to take policy change at the federal and state level to get more funding for these resources, you know.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hooray for Mr. Beast raising.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I'm wondering, it's probably naive, but would any of these coal companies have any responsibility to help to fund these projects? Or Thon had shown the preponderance of oil and gas companies, especially in the western part of the state, I mean, or the data center companies, the Amazons and Google, would they be a source of potential funding because they're major water users?
I haven't seen any funding come directly from the coal companies because many of the communities that we're working in, those mines are long gone. I mean, they haven't been in these areas for some of them decades. Now, what there is, it's called abandoned mine land funding. So some of the areas like the local PSDs, state government can get some of that abandoned mine land funding for some of these projects. So there is some of that available.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. You all have a good afternoon.
All righty. Well, that was fantastic. And there's still more to come. You know, speaking about water and its disappearance in warmer areas, there's a wonderful book which is called Cadillac Desert, which was written by Mark Reisner. If you have a chance to pick it up, you'll really, I think, find that interesting if you want to know about the politics of water. In fact, what did Mark Twain say? He said, whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting over. And I think he's right. And unfortunately, there's quite a fight going on in the West. Oh, yes. And Pat, if you would come up, what we're going to do now is we're going to start. And yes, we're going to have all of our speakers come up and sit here, because what's coming up next, well, it's kind of the pièce de résistance, as the French would say. I'm not sure what the Germans would say. Alles ist gut. But anyway, what we're going to be doing now is I want to introduce you to one of our favorite long-term friends and speaker here, and he runs the seminar. I guess we'd call this the conclusion of the seminar, the completion of the seminar. It's a great pleasure to introduce Henry Bob Hidell III to this room, because he's been around many memorable tables. He's known as Bob. And Bob is a founding chairman and managing director of Hidell International, where he runs and has been providing consulting services for the beverage, drinking, water, food, and nutrition industry since 1972, when he was a little boy. For more than 5 decades, he has been a trusted voice, a very steady, composed, and truly global authority in the world of water. His expertise has shaped brands, guided industries, and elevated the conversation around what we drink and why it matters. In recognition of these extraordinary contributions, Bob has been honored with the Berkeley Springs International Water Tasting Lifetime Achievement Award in 2013, an accolade that speaks volumes about both his impact and his integrity. But beyond the titles, beyond the accolades and the resumes, Bob is also a dear friend. We've shared many wonderful meals together over the years, conversations where water was always a bubbly topic, though I got to admit that occasionally our beverage choices may have packed a little more punch than just H2O alone. Bob brings wisdom without pretense, humor without ego, and insight without ever losing his humanity. It's an honor to call him a colleague, a collaborator, and most of all, a friend. Please join me in welcoming the one and only Bob Hidell.
Somebody's missing.
I just texted Pat.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, hi, folks. Those of you who have stayed and listened to this seminar, I do take notes. I will say, Jill, fantastic job on speakers. Thank you. You're just magnificent. What is really interesting today about this is, let's see, I am 14 years off of 100 years. So I have managed to live the last, since 1960, I've been practicing a discipline called hydrogeology. And we have a couple of hydrogeologists here. I think, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. Dan. You're one. Lou, are you back there? Lou Vittoria, over there. Any other hydrogeologists? I don't know you. I know Lou's fantastic. You sound fantastic, and actually gave an extraordinary presentation, which we're going to discuss shortly. We are the cardiologists of the earth. And the only, to visualize that, the picture you put up of all the, not all of, but the streams and rivers and flow of water in the United States, that is the blood system of why we exist. And it has, as a nation, we have been extremely fortunate in our water resources, to the point where we've probably wasted most of them. However, going back to the concept that I'm 14 years off of 100, what we did today is the first time I've seen it done really well. We went from a sommelier of water in the most sophisticated side of the industry to Travis's presentation that we just heard. And so I went from a very high note of enthusiasm about water to the reality of when you don't have water. And this was dramatic to me because what Travis described, I have worked on Indian reservations as a hydrogeologist. I lived in India for 10 years, more or less, which has only 1.2 billion people in an area equal to the United States east of the Mississippi. Think about crowding, think about waste treatment. We're living in a broad spectrum of human condition simply guided by water. You can't have peace without water. You cannot have war without water. You cannot have a civil society without water. And you cannot have an economy without water. And here we are when you look at the spread of the conversations that just took place. I am, I don't know, really humbled by what we heard today. So thank you, Jill. This was fantastic. So now I will ask each of you, and when our other participant comes back, he'll join us. So Joe, let me start with you. Of everything you said, oh yeah, with everything you said, what was the single most important thing you said?
Well, is this on? Yeah. I would say our main message is stay hydrated. Water is an incredibly important thing for human health. And so that if I had to say, that was the key message I was trying to get out. We're healthy, and whether it's tap, filtered, or bottled, drink water. Healthy hydration is part of our mission statement.
Thank you.
Keeps us young.
Yeah, it must. I'm still here. Is it sent, Dan? Yeah. In your statement, what do you think the single most important statement you made?
I'd say that we're all drinking from the same cup. People say we're divided, and West Virginia is a land of contrasts. Let's face it, those stories are contrasts, but we're all drinking from the same cup, in it together.
Travis?
I think, as far as like the Appalachian Water Project goes, we do everything we can to help individual families. I said it, and I'll say it again. The problem that we're trying to fix to close the water access gap in America is solvable in our lifetime. It's going to take money, it's going to take funding, and it's going to take policy change, probably at the state and particularly the federal level, to get that funding. And on our level, I just asked, like I said, if you know your legislators, if you know senators, talk to them about the problem that you've heard. We're online. It shows the work we do, because ultimately it's going to take policy change to do that. So definitely take that away.
And on that point, I'll start with a question to you, Travis. The question is this. So I had 10 years in India. If you want an example of actual poverty, poverty of water, social poverty, no sense of equal justice across the rights to water, the rights to waste treatment. One of the things we did in India was design central village. The towns are no different. I know the area you're in very, very well. spent a lot of time in Bland and Bluefield, and I'm saying from the 40s, by the way. Okay, so I remember that area, very primitive. But it should not deny people the right to safe drinking water, because the health costs of not having that are overwhelming, and this nation does not recognize that yet. It will. So what we did in India was design central village water systems. We did drill a well. We found water. We also, because we had electricity in some of these places, we designed technology that allowed them to get clean water. Various systems of filtration. The technology exists. Would that be a more expeditious means to address the immediate issue? And then you could build out over time. But at least they had some, like your guy that lived in the house that took his water out of the mine. He would have a solution to safe drinking water, if anything. If he wanted to bathe in mine water, I have a lot of experience in mines, mine water, he could do that, I suppose. But what's killing him is actually the lack of safe drinking water. Would that be a possible solution to expedite?
Yeah, so, on a large scale, ultimately it comes down to, the large municipal water systems coming through areas that don't have water whatsoever. I mentioned the home water rain system pilot. That's a faster solution. But that's in a pilot stage right now. We're going to build 2, see how they go, and see if it is something that we want to scale. We want to test the reliability, the quality of water, the cost to the homeowner, like the yearly cost. The system we're getting, I think it's going to be roughly $200 a year for the homeowner to maintain it. It's basically changing filters and a UV bulb one time a year. So those are things we have to do homeowner education to train them how to use it. Because ultimately, me at AWP, we don't have the resources to just keep going back. And when we're in major water projects, we don't have the time to keep going back and doing maintenance on these systems. So we have to train the homeowners how the proper use of them, the proper maintenance. And the same with septic systems. Septic systems that we're installing are a good solution to some of these areas, but without the proper maintenance, they're going to fail. You can't put grease in them. You can't put certain products in them, or they'll start failing. And then there's a cost associated with that, to pump them once every, if you do it right, maybe once every 5 years, you're going to pay $500 to have them pumped. Those are all things we're gathering and using the data to learn from. And so, yeah, to answer your question, the big water systems, they just take a lot of time. These things are being planned years in advance. The home water rain systems potentially would be a much quicker solution.
Cool, thank you. I want to introduce Pat again down at the end. What I discussed, Pat, was when I opened my comments about this panel, I said you went from the Sommelier altar water for discreet drinking, so to speak, to Travis, who discussed the fact that in America we have places in America that simply don't have water. And these are villages that came out of the coal mining industry, the iron ore industry, and they've been abandoned because our economy and our activities for economic growth have changed. And these are the economic backwaters, to use a really term badly. These are the economic backwaters and the social backwaters of America. And his job is to make sure that they can ultimately get water. So I've been doing this a lot of years now, this panel. This is the first time I've gone from the sophisticated use of water to simply the need for water. And so now you know what's going through my mind. So in your talk, What was the single most important thing you said in your mind? Not what the audience
That's-
thinks, but in
that
your
is-
mind.
That is the same question as when people ask me, Pat, what is the best water? There is no best water. The best water is the water you can drink your 2.5 liters a day. So the best water might be something different for you or you. And so when I should highlight what is the best point or the highlight point in my presentation, it was horror for me to put this presentation into 25 minutes. And I lost so many topics because I only have 25 minutes. A lot of people say, what are you doing? You're a water sommelier. Isn't that boring as hell? And when I do a keynote or when I do a water tasting, I always have the feeling I did not said everything I wanted to say. So I did masterclasses to bring all these content into a framework. And after that, I also had clients and guests who said, that was a wonderful masterclass, but Pat, what about this? What about that? And so I thought, okay, let's do a course to train water sommeliers, which is now pumped fully with hundreds of hours of content. So I can't say what is the highlight, but for me, the highlight is to understand that water is so much more than we all thought until a specific moment in lifetime. I think water is the foundation of life and the essence of our lifetime. As I said, we are losing water with our lifetime, and finding a personal drinking lifestyle for water helps getting old with health and keeps us healthy. A lot of people don't understand that. And as Arthur said in his opening, I worked in the psychiatry for a very long time. So I know what is happening in these institutions where people are getting old. In Germany, we say Altersheim. I don't know the word in, not Alzheimer, that's a disease or
Old, you're talking about old,
uh,
elderly.
where the elderly live when they're getting
Alter, yeah, Alterheim.
Altersheim.
An
That's,
elderly house.
yeah. And I worked also in these places and I saw, if you don't drink, you don't drink. You have to take your medicine. But if you don't drink, you don't drink. That's okay. That's not okay. It's better to drink than to take medicine. So yeah, medicine is okay. But when you don't drink day by day, this hurts. Everybody knows when you don't drink enough, you don't feel comfortable. Yesterday I had a travel of 18 hours and I know it by myself. I drink not enough in days like this. Why? I don't want to go to the toilet here and there and there. And so I arrived here and I was thirsty. Thank God for these Berkeley Springs bottles at my room. So when you ask for the highlight, I think the highlight is to remember day by day, that's what we have to drink. And I love what you do, really, because, you know, a lot of people listen to what I say in Europe and especially in the German-speaking countries. And I support Viva Con Agua in Germany, and they are doing stuff like you do in Uganda, in India, and everything that helps to bring people these access to water is more or less for me the access to a safe life. So that's what I think.
Thank you. And then you talked about water traveling deeper in the karst geology. And then you talked about surface geology, if I could use that term very loosely. And you talked about the surface geology seeing a warming of water that goes through those veins. And this is not a political statement, but I'm going to talk a moment about climate change. All right. With respect to climate change, we know these surface waters are going to get a lot warmer on the average because the water temperature you find on the surface and down the, so let's say the karst depth, is really a reflection of the water temperature of that region through the course of any year. So as water warms up, what do you think the biological implications of that are with respect to disease, migration of, I don't know how to define an invasive species, okay? None, because that goes on. The Earth is a dynamic organism. It is not a kind of, oh, this is where we live. It stopped, and the 100 years I'm about to live is, you know, I just stopped. Nothing was going on, interestingly, in the Earth. So let's talk a little bit about the implications of a warmer Earth's surface.
Right. So great question, and that's a career's worth of answer, but we will be succinct. It hit some major points. You know, and also it's worth noting that even the premise that talking about the physical reality of our planet could be construed as a political statement, that's just worth noting. That's where we are as a culture right now. And I know why you're caveating.
I was being polite.
Yeah, I understand, but you know, as a someone with research experience in this space, I just find it noteworthy. Again, we're all in this together, literally. So my research experience included surface water and groundwater, surface water, how those things interact. One of the things we see clearly, there was a paper published last year in Nature Communications, I believe, that showed clearly that surface water is warming in the continental US, and guess what? So is groundwater. Groundwater is also warming. This makes some sense. If you want to predict the temperature of groundwater, you know, you model it based on average annual air temperature. So there's always been that inherent relationship. So it shouldn't be a surprise. But here's the kicker. Depth of groundwater predicted the warming rate. Okay. Deeper, more resilient. And this has something to do with the water industry as well. We can think about, you know, different lenses of glacial water or other reservoirs that are more or less resilient out there. So we have high confidence in this. The question is now, what does it mean? Well, it means a lot. It means different things. So in West Virginia, it means a biological response for our cold water trout. This is our native species. This is the brook trout, our state fish. Brook trout is sort of the canary in the coal mine for climate change and streams in Appalachia, right? Brook trout is also an economic engine. It's also a cultural touchstone. It's something that matters to people, and it doesn't matter if you're, you know, coming in from DC or if you, you know, are living in Tucker County all your life or where you're from. It's a cultural touchstone. It's economically precious and a powerful source of revenue, and ecologically it holds these ecosystems together, and it's also at risk. Here's a challenge. In the places that are more stable, the temperatures are more stable, the physical habitat is tortured because they've been farmed largely or dredged, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a restoration opportunity. That's the way I would frame it. And there's investment for such things to restore spring creeks, to be able to produce the trout that they would be expected to produce if they weren't filled with sediment and silt. And so this is a fixable problem. It takes investment. But that's one way to look at it. Also, we have high confidence that you think of temperature as sort of a treadmill. The faster the treadmill, the warmer the temperature. The warmer the temperature, the faster the treadmill. All biological processes basically ramp up. So that means our metabolic rates ramp up. That means in some cases our growth rates ramp up. maybe it's not entirely bad. And in fact, in very, very cold environments, what we've seen is that a little bit of warming can increase growth rate and survival. So there is sort of like think about it like a hump or a unimodal kind of relationship. So a little bit of warming, increased growth, and then a lethal effect. And this is, something that we've observed in the scientific literature on many levels. So disease spread, we should be also very much paying attention to the transmission of tick-borne diseases and other things which we know are moving up at unprecedented rates across the Appalachian Mountains. These are real. So we don't want to minimize that, but we also want to be aware of where there is resiliency. And I should also say, while we're at it, that these mine pools in southern West Virginia often are producing cold water into these streams. The Tug Fork River, for example, is blessed with mine pool discharges that refrigerate that water. And we have, I shouldn't say this because this is sort of a secret, but I will, I trust y'all. Brown trout fisheries in unsuspected places are booming because of mine pool discharge water into those places. In fact, it often functions as though it was karst landscape. In other words, like this refrigeration effect that I mentioned in this neck of the woods. Well, in some ways, the same thing is happening in abandoned mines that are now filled with mine pool water in southern West Virginia. Now, that's a wildlife perspective. That's not a public health perspective, but there are benefits for communities, and there are anglers out there that very much value these things. And this is part of the network, the cultural glue, and it is at risk with increasing air temperatures. So there's a lot more to it. Those are a couple of key points.
Thank you. Interesting. Could you hand that to Joe Doss, please? So Joe, we've been friends for a very long time. You never trust the question I'm going to ask. I consider you an expert in legislation, the formation of legislation, often in targeted industries. So what do you think, I'm just talking water, what do you think would be a most important piece of legislation that would address some of the issues that your three colleagues on this panel have discussed, that would change how, this is a caveat, how Americans view water and how they should view water, and what kind of, and I'm talking in a global concept of legislation for the nation, what would you think would be a most useful piece of legislation to pass?
Well, I don't even pretend to be able to
Sure you
come up
can.
with something like that. I would say that, from our perspective with regard to bottled water, we have always advocated for water policies that are based on sound science.
Yep.
And they treat all users equally.
Yep.
And I think that, I can't pretend on how I know anything about how to get water to people who don't have it and all of those things that were being talked about. But I do say that we have to have comprehensive legislation about water use and bring in all the players, because quite frankly, when you start talking about water use, a lot of it is agriculture in the United States. So probably 78% of the water that's used in the United States is for agriculture.
That's true.
And so you have to take that into account, but it's not usually taken into account because the agriculture, the farmers are very strong politically. And so when you try to enact legislation that would take a comprehensive look at things, a lot of times agriculture is not at the table.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't directly answer your question, but I think we need comprehensive water use legislation.
The term you used, I think, is really vital. There's a difference between legislation and policy. You can assert a policy that would lead to the evolution of legislative change, for example. I sit on a couple of public boards in the town of Hingham where I live. Nobody knows where that is. it's a lot like southern West Virginia, you know. They know it exists because of the boundary, but they're not sure what's in it. So we have, for example, a tree cutting policy in the town. The town has 4,000 acres of natural forest, over actually close to 5,000 acres of natural forest. And why we have it is because forests, as you know here in West Virginia, are massive carbon sinks. They're probably the best carbon sinks after the oceans and lakes to reduce global change in the event you might believe in global change. And so we developed policies. Now, slowly, those policies are being converted into legislative mandates. The science is behind them. And so I like your use of the term of policy because it doesn't necessarily mean belting legislators over the head, but if you suggest a policy that they should review and undertake, and your counties, for example, decide that they want a clean water policy that isn't necessarily federal, but it begins to change the behavior of those people in that county if they're aware of it and if it's discussed publicly.
In each area of the United States, each state, even parts within a state, are different in terms of what water.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Let's go back to the specialties of the waters, because you have a valid position in the world as not only a sommelier, but a person who understands the different tastes, the different qualities of water that the earth provides naturally. And I would like to understand something. You became a sommelier because you could distinguish tastes, but there are other things that would make your discipline identify different water types from different sources. And the bedrocks that we deal with, I happen to like granitic bedrocks because I live in New England, and that puts out water that has low TDS because it takes a long. Water is a universal solvent. Do not forget that, by the way. It can dissolve anything. So its residence time in the earth is what dominates, in many respects, the decision path that you say this is good water. And it's not so interesting. Have you looked at water in that kind of depth in the things you say about water publicly and in groups? If that question makes sense to you, it may not. It doesn't make sense to me.
If the answer makes sense to you, let's see. Let's begin in the differences between water culture between Europe and the States. You have a completely different water culture. Some types of processing of water is completely normal to your society, to your people. For us, it's a mistake, you know? So that's one of the first things. When I look at a mineral water in a bottle and there is this sentence, UV filtration on it. So in Germany, this would no longer be a mineral water. That now would be a table water, because after you put UV light on a water, for a European understanding, it's no longer a natural product because it's processed. So now it's table water. So that's just to clarify that the water culture is completely different. So when I look at water to say, okay, that's a good water, then is UV filtration a very good point, because when you use UV filtration, and everybody here in the US knows that gives the water a bit more freshness and crispness. So when you now compare a water which is processed by UV light with another water without this, you would have a gap. And you have an advantage on an UV processed water, which Mother Nature does not give. So, and this is one of so many points that interacts with my view on the water. So, first of all, I try to find out which water I like when I look at natural waters, unprocessed waters. But, and that's a real big discipline. Yeah, we're coming from rainwater to glacial water to groundwater to well waters to artesian springs. Then the regions are different. You have other waters from the Alps than from Hungary, other waters from Canada than from Patagonia, and you can taste that. But, and that's so necessary, a lot of my colleagues are really hard in their focus on natural waters. So natural water is the one and only. But that does not face the truth on planet Earth. There are so many regions where people cannot access to a safe, clean, natural water. So we need to process the waters. We need to purify them. And that's, for me, the point. I see we have big players in the market, and they're just doing that for the profit. So re-osmosis, how is that called? Osmosis? Reverse. They're doing a reverse osmosis filtration for municipal water. They remineralize for that they can write something for taste, yes. And then they put UV light on top and say, that's it, that's the best for you. But through the label, I can see, no, you did it for your shareholders, not for the people. Okay, because this water is super expensive.
Yeah.
But the same way, if we have locations on planet Earth where we cannot do something else, we have to do this. We have to use reverse osmosis. We have to use remineralization. So that's nothing special, because when you're looking to the Asian space where we have so super low mineralized waters, you even can't drink a cup of coffee without getting these waters remineralized. So that's also a culture. And so what I see is with microplastics, nanoplastics, PFAS, yes, we have to wait for better regulations, but until then, we also have to work on solutions, therefore, for the people. And so when I judge over a water, I have to include all of this. And so it's something different if I'm a judge in a panel for the best water, or if I do this for people in a special region. Always depending on the needs.
That's a very, very good answer to that dilemma. And Europe has a fairly unique problem. It's a small region, and it's been occupied for a very long time. Its rivers are running out of water because of climate change. We're seeing the traffic on the Rhine disrupted more and more. I'm very familiar with the waters of Hungary. To an American, it's like drinking concrete. Okay, Borjomi's another one in the Russian state of Georgia, or they'd like to just say Georgia, but I don't want to confuse it with the U.S. And time changes. We are, one of my thesis advisors was a guy named Buckminster Fuller, who created this concept of spaceship Earth, where everything is connected, where you can't ignore water and you can't ignore culture and you can't ignore need. And so what happens is you try to build a model that takes into account cultural differences, hydrogeological changes. The Earth is a very, very dynamic environment. We just don't live long enough to see some of the more dramatic aspects of it, which can be fairly dramatic. But we're seeing where it used to be. Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, I had to go to Idaho, and there's no snow in that end of the Rockies, in the Sawtooth, and in the plains, it's the high plains area near Boise. And I'm looking at this and saying, this is terrible. It's terrible because there's no water to recharge. It affects many of the key rivers in the northern part of the US. And I expect to see an incredible drought. The snow buildup is very short and temporary in the mountains that are taking place now with the most recent storms, but that's going to drain off very rapidly because the heat is here now. We're entering spring, the heat is here. The rainfall, for a large part, is just going to run off the land into the rivers and flush out to sea. We're not going to be able to trap this into the aquifers of the western part of the nation, which is where agriculture takes place. So when we talk about food supply, let's add I'm just adding a dimension. I don't want to talk, but if we add the dimension of food supply to support the population of the earth, those locations are going to have to change. I would like anybody here to speak up, in the audience too, on what their expectations of how we're going to feed 8 billion people. I can't, well, I'm being blind. Oh, yes, please.
I'm speaking from the blind side of drinking water. I've been a purification plant operator for municipal systems for over 50 years. And I've started my career on the West Coast with some of the cleanest raw water sources that this country has, and come to West Virginia. Now, Oregon is God's country. West Virginia is almost heaven. So I've worked in the two best places you can work in America. The scenario is, though, we must never lose the aspect that conservation of our life-building source is critical. Not everyone is blessed with the aspect of having beautiful water to drink. Some folks just have to get that water out there so that people in the world can drink. 1.4 billion people in India. Last summer, I led a group of operators and engineers here in our park from around the world. And I was telling them some of the maximum contamination levels that we do in the United States. And this one gentleman from India came up to me and he said, if we get our drinking water clarity to 5 NTUs, we are happy. The scenario, folks, is that, yes, we are blessed with this water. We take it for granted. And we take it for granted because we jump up in the morning, we jump in the shower, we take a shower, it means nothing. But jump up in the morning and you go get in the shower and there's no water. Duh. Why? What's happened? This gentleman here mentioned the Colorado River.
Yes, sir.
I was in Sepulveda, California a number of years ago. Our Colorado River no longer runs to the Pacific Ocean. It stops in Sepulveda, California at the Sepulveda Water Treatment Plant. Now, here in West Virginia, we produce between 300 and 1 million gallons of water a day. The Sepulveda plant produces 625 million gallons of water per day. They take the last drop of a life source. The scenario is we can never forget that. The idea is that when you take that cup of coffee in the morning, there's somebody sitting somewhere in a facility ensuring that that water is coming out to meet just the standards that we have put together through our federal Safe Drinking Water Act. And with that, we are blessed with this and grateful for the Berkeley Springs International Water Tasting. And you gentlemen, the idea of what we see and what we can have is because of this whole scenario. We must continue and never lose the thought that water is a life source. It is life. We can go about 3 or 4 minutes without air. We can go about 10 days without water. Folks, we're down to less than 2.4% potable water in the world. We have to take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have 5 minutes,
Yeah, 5 minutes.
actually 4.5. Yes.
I just had a quick comment about DigDeep. I absolutely love that program. I think the success of that program is largely because it's small and it's kind of lean and mean, and at the same time, the people that actually do the work are people who are at the coalface, who are parts of the community. I think the also success of that program is probably because they don't rely on the federal government. Because in those scenarios, when the federal government comes in and says, I'm here to help you, that's when you run it. And even if you've got $300 billion from the federal government, which is about 100 Tomahawk missiles, if you've got that, I actually think you'd be worse off. I think what you're doing and your success is because you are small. And it's good enough. We're not going to solve all the problems, but you'll make a dent. It's a process. And I think looking at the federal government, if I just had 1% of this, you wouldn't have the success. And it's different from these other people because yours is more of a money problem, yours is a research problem, yours is a research problem, yours is a taste problem. But careful what you ask for.
It's also very engaging with the people who benefit from it, isn't it? It may be small, but it also requires engagement of those who will benefit from it. They know. Any other comments from the audience? Rafiq.
Thank you. Listening to all the speakers, there's a theme that I think that there's a little spark that kind of creates new ideas. And I go back to part of my heritage, when my mother was involved in a lot of community service as a doctor. And she had a slogan that said, which I think I'm learning here again, is it's better to light one candle than to curse the darkness. So thank you for lighting another candle.
Yep. Thank you. Yes, Jen.
I don't want to prolong, but you asked, how are we going to feed 10 billion people? And pretty soon, I think there will be 10. I'm not
Yes,
sure
yes.
the projection. But certainly a knowledge of water resources, where they are and where the people are, and being able to manage those resources responsibly, it's got to be immense. But also, I think that there really is advancements taking place in agriculture, like low cost, better seeds, better soil, better irrigation, more efficient irrigation. So I think all that has to work together if we're going to feed 2 billion people pretty soon.
Well, you said about 3 words that are really vital. Where the water is. All right. Very often the water is not where the people are. And remember, we're in a period of urbanization. China's urbanization would blow your socks off. People have moved from the hinterlands into the cities. The tentacles of supplying those cities with food, water, sometimes air, are reaching deeper and deeper into an already destroyed hinterland. And so urbanization has a lot to do with what we've just been talking about. Yes?
I just had a quick question. I hadn't heard anything about the basic change of weather or manipulation of weather that's causing a lot of these runoffs that are, okay, I don't want to go political, but do we have shed any light on that?
Does anybody, you
Want
want
to answer that?
Well, in West Virginia, there are efforts to Oceana, other little towns that have been hammered by flash floods. There are efforts. Well, the cleanup is still happening, and that's a reality check. Imagine that it's still happening.
Yeah.
But there is an Office of Resiliency in West Virginia, and the trust fund for the Office of Resiliency. Anyone guesses how much money is in that trust fund? Dustin has a guess. Go ahead, tell us.
$0.
$0. That's right.
Nice.
So what's the point? There are some initial efforts to study, the emergency planning for flash floods, but obviously that's just a starting point, not anywhere near where we need to be. My dad was serving as a dentist down in Man, West Virginia. Man, West Virginia has one of the unfortunate pieces of our national history where a slurry pond blew out and decimated a whole community as that sludge and water ran downstream. And that was a product of man, not a god, if you will. But what we see now with extreme weather is not going away. So I think, I want to be optimistic about how it can focus our mind. But I'll be honest too that I feel like we need grassroots leadership, not expecting it to come from Charleston or DC. And I do see signs of that. I think what Travis is doing here is a great example of that. This is happening. That's where the action is. So I want to leave you with an encouraging note, but let's not sugarcoat it. Those challenges are real. And I think drought and flood, West Virginia's faced both of those over recent years, and we are a case study for this. So I think there's a lot to learn, and I think those local voices are more important now than ever.
Thank you. We're going to have to wrap it up. We could go on all night. I want to thank you all so much.
I'll meet you in the bar.
So much. And I appreciate you really almost got us there to an optimistic and a high point there at the end. And I so appreciate that because good things are happening every day. New technologies, young people coming up behind us who are trying to fix who are creating good things and fixing all of these problems. So thank you. If you have one last word, just like.
I want to address one thing. So there's a lot of theories that we can manipulate the climate. The physics of the climate is so powerful that that's only human arrogance that believe we can make any kind of geophysical impact on something of the nature of the climate. The energies that flow between the elements that influence climate and influence humans and human habitation are far beyond any human effort to change what we are emerging into. It just is impossible.
There's a lot of information back there about Travel Berkeley Springs, what's going on. I want to introduce our executive director, Dustin Martin. He just promised.
I want to steal 30 seconds of your time. So thank you all so much for coming. Seriously, this is an amazing event. This is my first time here. I just started the week after this event last year. So really enjoying the event, really enjoyed our speakers. Thank you guys for everything you do for water, for our state, for the folks in Appalachia. I just want to make one point. The tourism industry in West Virginia is one of the 9 fastest growing tourism industries in the entire nation. On top of that, our economy in Morgan County specifically, 16.05% of our entire GDP are people that come from outside of our county and spend money. And the reason that they do that is because of the water that we have. One last point. Dr. Hitt, let's say your last name, okay? Dan Hitt, Dr. Hitt. He made a point that yesterday in the legislature, there was a debate regarding selenium levels in water streams across the state of West Virginia. And I was there. I sat on the House floor and watched that debate. And as we watch the tourism industry continue to grow in West Virginia, we have to keep in mind how important water and our natural resources are to the growth of that industry. That industry is $9.1 billion a year for our state, and $2 billion of that $9 billion come from the outdoor economy. And here in Morgan County, it's 100% of it. Water is extremely important to the future of our county and Morgan County, and we have to protect it. That's all I have.